So part of what it is that YouTube is much more concerned about the use of music and stuff. So I decided that instead of having the music that I played before stream on both, because when that goes live on YouTube and there's music on there, it just doesn't publish the whole video. I have to go back later and edit the video and edit the music out of the recording and then republish the video. So if any of my VODs that I've done recently on Twitch haven't appeared on YouTube, that's the reason why, is YouTube is waiting for me to go in and delete the music that's on it so that I can republish it. And I don't have time to do that stuff. I'm so overwhelmed with all of the other things that I have going on all of the time that it's hard for me to get around to doing those things. But anyways, now we're on YouTube. Hi everybody on YouTube. Glad that we're live here now too as well. All right, so again, we're talking about so disability and disposability. This is okay. So, I like doing things in a full circle kind of way. The circle that I'm trying to do now is really big. It's really a doozy, and I'm probably overdoing it. But that's me. So the conversation that we are having right now about disability and disposability in our leftist spaces, in our organizing, and in our thinking, right? We're trying to decolonize our thinking. That's the immediate conversation that we're having, and this is going to help us understand the bigger problem that we have with freedom in general. I'm going to restate some of the things that I was talking about last Friday, and hopefully state those things with more clarity. We don't have real freedom in our existence right now in this time as these physical bodies are moving through time. These physical bodies don't have freedom. They don't have freedom. And there's a number of systems and mechanisms which we have invented which prevent us from having any kind of real freedoms. And a large part of the difficulty in getting from where we are, this material existence where political bodies don't have freedom, to the place that I would like to go, that is a material reality in which political bodies have real freedom. Right? The path to get there is so obfuscated with the perverted language and understanding of the oppressors that we can't have a conversation about how to get from here to there, how to get from no freedom to a state of having freedom. We can't even have the conversation because all of the language tied to rights and freedom is so meaningless. It's so, this is the postmodern problem that I've talked about before, where it's not that there isn't content. It's that there's an overwhelming amount of content that is ascribed to rights and freedom. And the overwhelming amount of information that is meant all confuse our ability to really understand what freedom is supposed to be, what it means, how we get it, where it goes, and how that thing, freedom, as a thing operates as a relationship between us, because that's how it's supposed to work, is that freedom is supposed to be a liminal space between us. That's what freedom is. It is the space in which our rights exist, in that liminal space between the actual political bodies, all of us. But all of that space is chock full of legal apparatuses and legal protections and national identity and national protections and citizenship and gender politics and racism and all of these other things are just complicating on top of a base subject that we don't understand because we are so divorced from an actual existence in which we have freedom that we can't understand what that is supposed to be. Which is that's the conversation I was trying to get into on last Friday, and I hope that I've explained it with a little bit more clarity than I did then. White supremacy persists as the unspoken normal background for settler society, even amongst those who see themselves as progressives. Yeah, progressive. It becomes as common, yet as unnoticed as blinking for white people. Yes, and that's a really good way to becomes as unnoticed as blinking. This is precisely why white people almost always only ever come to see colonization through epiphany, which we were talking about last week, while the colonial subject sees and experiences it inherently and can only ever notice you are blinking when you pay attention to it. Right. I really like that analogy, and I might actually use that. I think that's a good analogy for even in the classroom. Another part relates back to when I talked about how white people can only see colonialism through epiphany. A few lives back, a few episodes ago. My epiphany was carrying my name around in the world. Oh, right, Nisa. I remember you telling me about this. It was a strange lesson in embodied experience and subconscious blinking. Right. That it is an interesting way to. It's an avenue of epistemological access. It is an interesting avenue of epistemological access for you to have had that epiphany through your material relationship with the world by having that kind of name, having the kind of name that you have. Freedom is the ability to disassociate from the system, from the systems that are existent. That are extant. Freedom is the ability to question. Freedom is the ability, because I was saying yes. Freedom is the ability to dissociate from the systems that are extant. Yes, answers the question. Yes, that is correct. Freedom is the ability to disassociate from the systems that are extant. But that is, again, that is a very good way to think about freedom. It is, of course, still a very limited way to think about freedom. But, and this is, Jane, this is exactly what I would like us to do as a project. When it comes to trying to understand freedom, the more ways that we can articulate it, the more stuff that we can throw at it, the better, always. So, not only is it a good way to describe it, but I think that it's a building upon way to describe it that will be helpful. That will be helpful. Yes. Should freedom include the protection from those extant systems? See, freedom shouldn't include protection. Freedom should necessitate or imply, necessarily categorically imply. Well, maybe that's just semantics. Maybe include still works the same way that I mean it. But yes, we could develop better systems. Well, see, that's the thing. I don't know that we can develop better systems. And that comes with a caveat. I don't know that we can develop better systems yet in the material conditions, right? If here we are in our present state, political beings with no freedom, and where we want to go is a situation, material conditions in which political beings have freedom. I don't think we systematize our way there. I don't believe that there's any system or any framework that just does the trick. And this is, I want to say, a large part of the mistake that humanity in general, has made in general with regard to, it's something that I've talked about before on the stream, is if we, okay, I'm going to say this again, slightly incorrect. In the same way that I have previously said this slightly incorrectly, and then I'm going to expand upon and clarify. So what I have said previously is that if we trace back the origins of philosophy to we're talking about Western academic philosophy, from Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and then the pre-Socratics, and then back further, right, before the pre-Socratics. The reason why those humans were sitting around doing philosophy in the first place was because those humans had become so inundated with the daily affairs of managing the state in which they lived. And there was no state in the way that we think about state now. It was a community of people, right? Communities of people were coming together. These communities of people were growing larger and were having to come up with ways to guarantee all of the freedoms of all of the people who are all now living in a confined space. And the thinkers who were sitting around doing this philosophizing were spending so much of their time deciding on who was going to spend this on what and what kind of projects and who was going to be in charge of these things. And everybody was deciding everything democratically, which took way too long, and nobody wanted to do all of that stuff. So those people sat around and figured out how to invent the idea of a state whose responsibility it would be to arbitrate over people's affairs and over laws and over maintaining people's rights. Right, and that's the if we trace back the origins of philosophy, the beginnings of philosophy are people trying to be free from the state, but not because the state oppresses them, but because they are the state. They are spending all of their time and energy being the state, and those people didn't want to do that anymore. So they figured out how to make the state not them, right? And figured out how what they believed were just frameworks and just apparatuses for maintaining these things. And I believe that was all a massive mistake, right? I think that democracy is also not the right way to go about it. But the establishment of a state is not the right way to go about it. So, it would not harm those who wish to disassociate. And see, that's cursed chaos. Jane, a better system that would not harm those that wish to dissociate. That is a very fundamental, very important aspect of freedom that clearly demonstrates our actual lack of freedom right now. Right? Nobody has the choice to opt out of the system of capitalism. That choice doesn't exist. You cannot opt out of capitalism. And that's I think why your earlier when you had made the comment, how did you phrase it? Freedom is the ability to disassociate from the systems that are extant, is a good definition, because it should be the case, is if you are in a system of free association, then you necessarily should be able to disassociate. If you cannot disassociate without harm, you are in a coercive situation. Necessarily. That is a categorical truth, which is necessarily true. Incontrovertible. It cannot not be the case. Right? That is a test of pure reason that we have just gone through. Put a video that I watched this morning in Discord. Cool. Was particularly interesting and touches on these topics. Well, then we'll probably take a look at that. There's no silver bullet. As long as bigots are around, they're going to try to be superior. Yes, Matt, but I've got to push back on that. That's not the only reason why I believe that frameworks, that we can't framework our way there. Necessarily. Oh, and I haven't explained why that was quite wrong. But okay, the reason why that explanation about philosophy was wrong when I first gave it is because I didn't add the clarification that I was talking about. Only the Western tradition, pre-Aristotle, right, tracing back to Socrates and Plato, Socrates, and then the pre-Socratics, right? If we have a narrow understanding of philosophy, which is what I mean there, then that statement is true. If we have an expanded understanding of philosophy, where we understand that there are indigenous philosophies all around the globe that all had deep, rich, meaningful philosophical understandings of the world preceding even the pre-Socratics, then that's obviously not the origins of philosophy. So that's with the first time that I first started talking about that, I explained it wrong because I skipped over all of that. That's my Western academic pedagogy, the traditions that have given me the knowledge that I have conditioned me to be the kind of being which assumes that philosophy is in the Western tradition, erasing all of those hundreds of thousands of years of other indigenous philosophies all throughout history and the world. So making that clarification there. All right. So yeah, there's no silver bullet as long as that's the pushback is that the bigots don't have anything to do with us not being able to framework our way there, and the bigots will work themselves out necessarily. We should, right now in our material conditions, we should recognize that there are bigoted people. That bigoted people exist should not be part of our telos for the kind of society that we want to envision. Because in that society, there won't be bigots. There won't be bigoted behavior. And we need to think that way. We need to understand that for us to get there, we need to figure out how to eliminate the manufacturing of bigoted attitudes and bigoted behaviors. That needs to be part of the telos of how we get to the end where we're going. But right, can we get socialism anyway? Set up for anarcho-communism, right? We need anarchy, right? Effing now, yes. Socialism. Let's see. How well socialism is going to actually accomplish freedom. Yeah, see, that's the any way that you crack it, no matter how you approach it, socialism is still not going to be freedom. It's still going to be a material situation so completely divorced from a world of freedom, too, that it's still hard to imagine how we would get there. But I guess that also depends on what we mean by socialism, because now that I'm thinking about it, if what we have, rather than socialism, let's say that we have, let's say for the sake of hypothetical, let's say that we have full workplace democratization. Let's just play with this idea. If that's fancy words, this is the whole idea that Richard Wolff is about. Richard Wolff doesn't advocate for socialism. Richard Wolff doesn't advocate for communism. Richard Wolff advocates for workplace democracy and setting up as an avenue, right? Obviously, for getting to socialism and then for getting to communism. That's why he still says things about socialism and communism. But his immediate project is actually workplace democratization. So let's think about that. Rather than thinking about a nebulous idea of what socialism might be, because there's that world, whatever socialism would be, a world that we leftists would call socialist, is too far away. But we could imagine workplace democratization. Yes. It reduces the suffering from the transition. Well, yes. And if that's, let me see. Let me think about this. See, the more that I think about it, the more I think that workplace democratization might be a good pathway to real, actual freedom. Because what workplace democratization requires is it requires not just, okay, let's go micro first, and then we'll go macro, and then we'll zoom out. So if we go micro, we are concerned with people who work in a business, right? For a business. That business now becomes a nearly entirely flat structure. There might be some hierarchy, but the hierarchy is not going to be a pyramid hierarchy. The hierarchy will probably be a 2 or maybe a 3-tiered hierarchy, where most of the positions in those hierarchies are still kind of relatively flat relative to each other. And in these kind of organizations where we've got a workplace, everybody in the workplace has some idea about all of the jobs that take place in that workplace. So everyone from the most important, the most niche, specialized set of skills in the workplace to the least. So like the janitors or whatever. right? But everybody in the workplace has an idea of what everybody else's job and function are. And those people understand the relationships between the roles of the job. There is no specialized labor. Everybody in the business has an idea of what everybody else is doing. And this is for transparency, and it's for increasing efficiency. Because if I'm over here doing this thing and you're over here doing this thing, well, it might be obvious to me because of the way that I'm doing this thing that I'm doing over here, that there's a much easier way for you to do this, or a much more efficient way for you to do this, that you are never going to notice because you don't have this perspective, right? So sharing perspectives increases our transparency, but also increases our efficiency. And so when we are all making decisions with and for each other, then we learn how to empower each other. That's part of the understanding of freedom that we are divorced from, is that it's not so much that we need structures to prevent us from stepping on each other's toes. That's not really the problem. We need structures that help us figure out how to empower each other, how to lift up and support each other in a community of people in a way that you are now supported by not just a few people, everybody in your workplace, for everything that you do in all of your endeavors. And guess what? Those people are probably going to care about your well-being even when you go home. So they're going to want you to have dental care and medical care and all of those things, because not just because they want them to, but because you are an integral valued part of the team, the integral part of the team that we all need to be stronger and to be better and to be successful. That's what being is together, is us figuring out how to do that. And it's when we talk about freedoms, when we talk about rights, it usually is about ways to not step on each other's toes. And I think that completely misses the point. We should have structures. If there's going to be structures and frameworks, those don't prevent us. They don't stop us. They don't inhibit us. They only enable us. They only empower us, right? That's how we need to understand what real freedom is. Freedom isn't obstruction. It's not a negative thing. Boy, we haven't had a full conversation about negative and positive liberty in a while. Something that I've said before, a negative conception of liberty, because in rights discourse, there are two ways that we think about liberty and freedom. In rights discourse, there are two ways. In all of the ways we think about what rights mean and how they apply, we always use both. It's never one or the other. It always has this dualistic feature between negative and positive liberty. And a negative conception of liberty is metaphysically incoherent. It makes no fucking sense. It really... And this is why. Because freedom should never be about limits. It should never be about inhibition. It should never be about limiting myself. Freedom should be about empowering. Right? And but the language of the oppressor. Let me read some of the chat. Suffering is provided by capitalism in the right. Socialism is, to me, is whenever the workers control the means of production directly. Right. And that's why when socialism first came up in the chat, I was like, no, that's not right. That's not the way to freedom. And let me qualify that. right? Because the part of the primary problem that we have is that our rights are moderated by the state, which means that our rights aren't ours. They belong to the state. If it is the case that our rights are arbitrated by the state, we don't have rights. The state has our rights and doles out to us. And this is an unjust condition. And socialism doesn't avoid that in most of its forms that have... Let me be more clear. When we're talking about socialist governments that exist right now today, if a government would call itself socialist, Denmark, right? Let's pick an easy example. And it's not actually fully socialist, and I think that there's a lot of nuance to be had about what it is and isn't, and the ways it is and isn't socialist. But it is still a state which moderates on behalf of the citizens what their rights are. And that's not freedom. But if what we are talking about is socialism, is complete workplace democratization, right? Because I talked about the micro. If we zoom out and look at the macro, right, from an industry scale, so we've got the workers who are working in some company, right? If we zoom out, right, all of these companies network together and they all know each other and are transparent, and those companies organize themselves in a flat structure so that they can best figure out how to increase transparency and efficiency, right? And not in the same way that capitalism wants to increase transparency, because when capitalism is talking about transparency, it just means that those people who are the most higher ups can see everything that everybody down below is doing. That's not what we mean, right? When we mean transparency is everybody sees what everybody's doing. And when capitalism is talking about efficiency, it's talking about eliminating any extra dollars so that it can shift all those dollars up, right? That's what efficiency is in a capitalist system, is that your bottom line is a zero, so that there's a balance here of zero, and then you can shift all of the money up. You do everything as cheaply as possible. And there's another, this is something I haven't talked about in a long time. It's not just about funneling the money up, though this is an important aspect of how workplaces are organized. Do you all remember during COVID when we had a whole bunch of industries nearly collapse, and those industries nearly collapsed because of the distribution networks were spread so thin? This is on purpose. The networks of distribution and the networks of organization that other companies maintain with each other are kept razor thin, so that there is absolutely no power that the workers can eke out of those systems. It is about funneling the money up, but it's also important to recognize that, like truckers, for example, when the truckers are doing their trucking, they have to be paid the minimum they could possibly be paid at every step. And every resource that they're given has to be as minimal as it can possibly be. Because if companies just provided them with good pay and with good trucks and with good resources, then they would have bargaining power that they could use to negotiate better terms. The distribution systems in our capitalist system are kept arbitrarily fragile on purpose, not just so all of the money shifts up, that's a big part of it, but so that those systems are so fragile that the working class can't pick them up and take them on purpose, to utilize them for their own means. So when I'm talking about increasing efficiency, one of the things that I mean in a flat socialist organization is efficiency, as in we have robust networks of distribution that can survive natural disasters and epidemics and massive upheavals of whatever. That we have robust systems which can endure shocks, which we don't have. Capitalism doesn't have those kinds of things. Capitalism has no safeguards for the mechanisms that we all depend on for our needs. We don't have a backup plan or a plan B for how we're going to distribute medicine. Right? So, we should arbitrate everything ourselves. And I think that, Jane, I think that that's the direction I'm going. I want to say that there is probably a point of diminishing returns. I think that at some point, we get to a point where our need to intercede and to involve ourselves in every little nitty-gritty detail is asking too much, right? Most average citizens, material conditions right now, and I'm imagining material conditions at some place closer than where we want to go. Right. So imagining the material conditions in some place closer than we are, even the people in this situation, all of the citizens that are in this situation are not going to want to weigh in on whether we pave this road or that road, or whether we pave an extra mile or back an extra mile, or how we organize our water filtration system. Some people are just going to be completely uninterested in those things. And this is when we were talking last week about equitable distribution as opposed to equal distribution of liberties or powers, that of us should be to some degree responsible for all the things. But also there is that network of that slope of diminishing returns, and not everybody can be an expert in how we're going to set up the phone lines and how we're going to set up the internet and how are we going to set up the power and how are we going to pipe the water. That requires expertise, and we shouldn't include everybody's weight. We maybe and I have to put a caveat in that because I'm making a lot of sweeping assumptions here. Everyone should always have the right to weigh in, but it should not maybe necessarily be the case that everybody gets a final say. And that's part of the problems with democracy in general, right? People like RFK should not be in charge of healthcare, any aspect of it. They should not be making any decisions. They should not be influencing anybody. They should not have a platform that they can spew their dog shit ideas where they are just making up absolute garbage on the fly. Right? We shouldn't allow, to some extent, for everybody to weigh in on everything. But I'm not sure how I might be making the same kind of mistake that I was calling Matt for earlier, where I should be assuming that we are not going to have people like RFK, rather than trying to figure out how we resolve, how we deal with people like that. Huh. I might have to think about that for a minute. Sock Dems want capitalism with treats and guardrails. Yes, yes, and that's yes. Okay, so and that's why I'm trying to make that distinction, Matt, is because a lot of times when people say socialism, what they mean, a lot of times what those people mean when they say socialism is what they mean is sock dem. What they mean is what Denmark has, and that's not bad. That's way better. I would take that. Don't get me wrong, way better than what we have. It's still not freedom. But yeah, that's a good distinction, and I'm glad that we made that distinction. Would not use the term socialist. I would use horizontalist instead, and I like this. I really like this kind of rephrasing and this kind of I think that a lot of times on the left, we use language like a uniform. That we expect each other of other leftists, or when if we think that we are a leftist, that we choose to use certain kinds of language, right? Bourgeoisie, or base and superstructure, or socialism, right? I think that these can be helpful tools, but I think that they can also be dogmatic. And by expanding, it's already gone too far up there. By expanding how we understand these terms and starting to use fuller, more vibrant language, that I think that we can accomplish more, rather than sticking to the language that leftists stick to because we need to be identified as in our uniform as leftists. I think that we need to start expanding our vocabulary, because when Marx critiqued capitalism for the first time, Marx is critiquing capitalism from within the oppressive system. And therefore, his analysis is reactionary, is a reaction to the system, not outside of it. A reaction to the system from within the system. And because of this, the language that Marx uses is limiting, is limited. And at every turn, all throughout history, since Marx has critiqued capitalism, capital has co-opted those words, has reused and rebranded the language of leftists in a way that makes that language ineffective. We need to come up with new tools. We need to take the tools that the oppressor has given us and retool them, re-understand them, because the terms and concepts and ideas that we have been given are not going to help liberate us. We have to come up with something new and different. Sorry, I need a break from my mouth. Social democracy. We the people would delegate via Direct democracy. Yes, 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 Jane. And I should have just keep reading instead of I would not use the term socialist. I would use horizontalist instead. And we the people should delegate via direct democracy. Yes. And the anarchist term for this is fluid emergent leadership, which is something that I've talked about before on the stream. So this should be a refresher for many of us. This is the kind of situation in where you have a group of people, and when the group of people encounters a situation, that group of people go, "What do we need?" And whoever is most qualified goes, "Hey, I know what we need." And everybody goes, "Okay, you're the leader for now until we resolve this problem." And then when the problem is resolved, that leader is now just like everybody else again. Right? Fluid emergent leadership, where we decide based on our knowledge and our need who and what will best fit this situation. And then when that situation goes away, so does the organization or structure or temporary hierarchy that we have established. So too does that go away. We don't put anything in place permanently. That's what government does. The role of government is to see something that needs to be done and to make itself indispensable for accomplishing this thing that needs to be done. That's what government does, is it makes itself indispensable in the function of whatever the need is. Fluid emergent leadership identifies a need, eliminates that need, and then eliminates the position that eliminated the need. Because you don't need hierarchy after the problem. You just solve the problem. Instead of organizing a whole structure to maintain a problem, which is what governments do, is they organize a structure to maintain a problem. And accessibility. We've gotten off topic. I've gotten off topic. Accessibility is important. Many Americans are illiterate. We were talking about a different kind of accessibility. But yes, but that is actually a very, very, very good point, Matt. Leftists have I should start at the top. Leftists have a market problem. If your theory words aren't persuasive, use different words, regular words. Yes. A big, syllabic words. I can't even say the word. You don't have to use big fancy words. In fact, if you avoid using big fancy words, people understand you better. Generally. Socialist, libertarian, even leftists have become bastardized buzzwords. Yes. Accessibility is important. Many Americans are illiterate. And politically illiterate, I think, is especially important to emphasize there in following with the comments. That many Americans are completely politically illiterate. In that they look at AOC and they think that AOC is left of center, despite the fact that globally speaking, AOC is kind of right-ish. She's right of most centrist in most parts of the world. Something about the master's tools, yep, and the master's house. Can't pick up a hammer and understand it is my hammer now. Yes, you can pick up your hammer and understand that you can use it in different ways. However, it is your hammer now. It is your hammer, and you can do whatever you want with it. And that's what seizing the means of production is really all about. It's about recognizing that we already have our hands on it. And this is why the freedom problem from getting from the here to here, a place where we actually have freedom, is so frustrating, is because this is us. We have the power. We have the control. It is within our ability to do this. For us to seize real freedom for humanity and, I don't know, thousands of years is something that humans could just do. They could just, but they would have to realize how to do it. In the same way that seizing the means The workers are the means of production. There is no means of production without the workers doing the work. They are the means of production, right? They just have to realize, they have to wake up and realize that they have the power to just do whatever they want to. And freedom is going to be the same way. It will require a revolution of thought, in the same way that seizing the means of production will require class consciousness, right? Actualizing real freedom will require some kind of social awakening in that same vein. Kaya Matara, I actually wrote an article. Of course you did. I love you so much. I actually wrote an article on better messaging for the left. More electoral than revolutionary, but still has some weight. Okay, the same weight for each. Good. Thank you, Kaya Matara, for sharing the link. I'll go check that out. And can you do me a favor and share the link for the other thing that you told me about on last stream? I'm gonna double check and never mind. Liberal democracies enabling genocide is not a bug, it's a feature. That's also yours. That's your other one? Yeah, okay. Okay, I didn't lose it. I do have it. Good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those. Right. Can be our hammer. Yep. Yes. He is saying the model of consolidated power we have is bad. How dare you? I like that Karen emote. More than half the voters think Democrats are left. Right. Like read a book. Good. Oh, and we're so off topic. Let me get this back on topic. How do we bring this back full circle? There is no authority on truth, we all are. That's the full circle. There is no authority on truth, we all are. That's the reality of postmodernism, that's where we're going. Okay. What we have is a kind of unfreedom. No, it's not going to help us get there. Banality of evil is not going to help us get there. Yep, you can see in real time my diminishing hope for the electoral system between the two articles. Yeah, I bet that's going to be fun to read. Actually, check the video I sent you. Okay, yeah, I think that's what I'll do is go take a look at that. In the general Discord. Or is it not in general? You put it in... You told me earlier where you put it, and then I didn't remember. Hey, I bet that's it. Okay, yes, I see it. And I will do that, but first I want to do another thing. I think. Because the other thing's going to be shorter. So, I don't know. I think the other thing would be a better way to end. We are not going to get to plastic pills today, I don't think. Which will be okay if we don't. Because it's a big circle. It's a really big circle this time, and it might take us a few days to do the whole circle. So, I bet this is where we want to go next. And then... And then we'll turn over to Crutches and Spice. I think that's probably how we'll wrap up our conversation for today. I think we're still quite a ways away. I'm just planning. I'm trying to envision the whole circle all the way around. Do that other thing before this one, you think, Nisa? Do the other thing before this one? Absolutely, Crutches and Spices never misses. It's really a good one. Pretty sure it was you that put that in Discord. That well, we can come back full circle to it. Either way. Okay. I still think the messaging one is valuable, though. I think eventually I'll write a far more radical one. Well, no, absolutely, and that's I'm really looking forward to checking it out, because it's I know optics of the left is such an interesting thing to me, because the whole conversation is so anti what the left should be, in my opinion, but also is really important, and we can't ignore the material conditions. We have to recognize it. That's a whole ass can of worms that I'll open up in a minute. Touches on freedom and morality and ability a lot. Okay. Yeah, I'll do this one first. Yeah. That'll give me an opportunity to finish up my coffee, eat a snack, and give my voice a break for a little bit. Because I bet I'll pause and talk a little bit through this video, but this will give me a little bit of a break. Wild how Trump got thousands of payments from Epstein's secret bank, totaling over $1 billion, but he's clearly not involved, right? But the whole thing is wild. That we, the public, are still asking for the Epstein files, right? I don't know why millions of Americans haven't taken to the streets to dismantle their government yet. To be honest, I'm still waiting for you all to figure out that we need to stop going to our jobs and doing the things that we're doing. We need to dismantle the fucking government. Clearly. Because here we all are, still asking for the Epstein files, right? And we can't even get a crumb. We can't even get a pretend crumb of justice. Are you fucking kidding me? Why is this government still in existence? What are you all waiting on? America, what the fuck are you waiting on? How much worse do you need this to be before you decide to give a shit about the fact that your government doesn't care about you at all? Apparently MTG was on some very serious news program yesterday, and it was shockingly coherent. We are in mad, absurd world when MTG is our voice of reason. We don't need the list. We need to believe physical evidence and victims. Thank you, Matt. And that's more to the point, right? We don't actually need the list. At this point, we don't need the list, right? So when it comes to public opinion, sometimes that just matters more, right? We all know that there's guilt there. We just need to go about figuring out what to do about that there's guilt. We don't need the fucking list. You're right. That doesn't matter. It would be nice to have the proof so that we could all have the formal, but at this point we need to just get it over with. Apparently, oh yeah, James from the internet was talking about it. Yeah, James from the internet is pretty awesome about covering that stuff. Good. Maggot accidentally agrees. It's usually for a bad reason. That's true. I'm not employed as a protest. Protesting the system. I nap and do activities on the clock as a form of protest. Well, I've thought about ways that I can protest too. Educators end up with kind of, well, so I'm adjunct, so I'm contract from some semester to semester. If I wasn't an adjunct, then I would have considerable power, weight, and sway. I would be able to protest, and I could protest with my students, and I can protest as a demonstration for the classroom. Actually, there are whole mechanisms where you can set up the course, and I protest by not teaching the course. Students can still do the work, and they can still get their A, right? But I protest by not doing the work, by not showing up. And that is something that I thought about, but I have to be employed in a different situation than I currently am for me to have that kind of power and sway. But no, I mean, we should have already. America should have already been past the point where we realize that we need to do something. Anyways, maybe now is a good time to play the video. Now I just want to rant more about that stuff, but just talking about genocide as a form of protest, right? It really is. Well, and just talking about indigenous philosophies is a form of protest, and that's one of the other things that I weigh with what I can do in the classroom too. There are things that I can do to make a bigger stink, but I think that the strategies that I employ now are also good strategies. I'm a seed planter. I don't talk about revolutionary ideas in the classroom. I would never actually talk about revolutionary ideas in the classroom. I, however, drop breadcrumbs. Lots and lots of trails of breadcrumbs, right? That would lead rational people to certain understandings. And sometimes I get to watch when that understanding happens in the classroom. And some student starts talking about the fact that, well, we should just be feeding people and we should just be housing people. Right. And I didn't put any revolutionary ideas in that kid's head. They just read the course material and made their own decision that maybe we should just solve our problems ourselves rather than there's great value into the ability of me to fly under the radar. I think is a good way to put it. That I get to plant a lot of seeds and to take place in a lot of to take part in a lot of people's awakening by providing the breadcrumbs. But now I just keep rambling. Let me get to the video, otherwise we're never gonna get to this. Thank you again, Nisa, for posting the video. I appreciate it.
This is the third body we found this month. Our community's getting nervous. All signs point to a killer on the loose. A predator snatching lives with no mercy. Without government or police, what do we do? One of the most pressing questions asked of anarchists like myself is how anarchy intends to deal with, to put it bluntly, the bad people. You know what I mean? The criminals, the serial killers, warlords and rapists. The worst of the worst. For those not in the know, anarchism is the philosophy and practice that opposes all hierarchy and authority, along with their justifying dogmas, and proposes the unending pursuit of anarchy, a world without rule, where autonomy, mutuality, and free association form the basis of our society. Such a definition clashes with the mainstream idea of anarchy as one of violent chaos, but such an idea is the assumption that authority is necessary for social order. Anarchists seek to challenge that assumption and put forward a radical vision of what could be without the domination of authorities. For further explanation, you can check out my video on how anarchy works. Back to the question of bad people, you're going to get all sorts of how to deal with them from all sorts of self-identified anarchists, even answers that I wouldn't consider consistent with anarchy. You'll get responses that range from philosophical quibbles over defining badness, to attributing all badness to the system, to basically recreating the state and policing but slapping the anarchy label on it. So let's get into the question of bad people in a world without authority. We're going to explore the bad, the ugly, and maybe, just maybe, the good too. Stay tuned. They say if it bleeds, it leads, so it's no surprise that crime dominates the media landscape. From old-fashioned newspapers to online feeds, you'll find reports on the latest murder, drug bust, or robbery. True crime pages reach millions of people daily. TV shows dramatize the criminal underworld, either from the police or the criminal's points of view. The media thrives on the attention captured by crime. It's quick to dub rampant crime as anarchy, which of course demands the imposition of law and order to keep us safe. Because that's what we all crave, right? Safety, security, peace of mind. In the name of these things, we sacrifice our privacy and freedom. We take our laptops and electronics out of our bags. We move through spaces with omnipresent security cameras. We cross borders according to the power of the passed to us by the fortune of our birth. The problem is that no matter how much we sacrifice, no matter how stringent our security protocols or harsh our laws and punishments, we're still no closer to the safety we seek. There will always be more to sacrifice in the name of necessity.
You need documentation to travel freely, you're not free. Categorically, simply. That's just true. Right, we need a world where people don't need to prove who they are or that they belong anywhere. That's the problem.
The law varies across the world, as do crime rates. But whether your country is a hotspot or a haven, there are fundamental problems with the state's approach to justice. For one, most crimes, whether violent crimes or property crimes, go entirely unreported. In criminology, this is known as the dark figure of crime. For all the propaganda that fills the airwaves, the police are quite bad at dealing with even reported crime, so many people don't even bother. It's very difficult to get global statistics on this, but even in the incarceration capital of the world, it appears that very few serious crimes end with an arrest, let alone a conviction. Of those convictions, around 5% or more may be wrongful convictions. The rates are even worse when it comes to reports, arrests, and convictions for sexual assault. This is in a country with the most highly funded police in the world, yet they fail by their own measurements of success. And what?
Yeah, I'm not going to have a whole aside about it, Matt, but that's a sales. Oh, it's not up there. I need to fix this. I'll figure that out some other time. But That is a strategy that I'm familiar with. I worked in retail sales for, I worked in retail sales management for about a decade after having climbed up the ladder in retail sales. So, when it comes to sales strategies and sales tactics, that's this this what is it called? It's some kind of transaction model. It's incremental transaction model is what it's called. I can't remember that what the term for it is now. But it is something that I have actually studied. I've been trained on by salespeople on this tactic in particular. And it is a large part of how I think about how I teach the class. I'm more interested in small short-term gains that will lead to a larger long-term investment on their behalf rather than any kind of big victory. I'm not interested in any kind of big victory in the classroom. I am never interested in any kind of big victory in the classroom because there's nothing that I can do in the classroom that will make a student's life better. I am interested in short-term gains that will get them to invest certain ideas and in certain values and in certain attitudes for themselves so that they can figure out that they have the ability and the power to make their lives better for themselves. That's what my goal is in the classroom, is to give a bunch of little itty bitty bits so that enough the students can pick up enough of those things and have something that gives them the rather than me selling something to them, they have something that they have amassed themselves, right? I'm not giving them anything. They are picking up and taking for themselves is the idea. It's part of the idea. I am an anarcho-monarchist. I see all comrades as kings and queens. Okay. An anarcho-monarchist. All comrades as kings and queens. I think I could be on board with that. I like that. Theory is that getting someone to tell you something is super persuasive because they are telling you. Oh, right, because they're telling me. Right. In this kind of stuff, I studied the science of business, sales, marketing, management, capital. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting that the training that I have had in retail sales has been so valuable to me, having taken that information and completely retooled it. Right. I'm trying to think of another good example. Oh, right. So, one of the sales strategies that I think works the best is rather than you being a salesperson and them being a customer and you are working this way with each other. There are subtle things that you can do as a salesperson to where you put yourself on the same side of the customer, and now you're on the same side as the customer evaluating the product, right? You are not trying to sell anything to the customer. You are with the customer trying to evaluate the product, right? And so you're on the same side. And this sales strategy is one of the fundamental aspects that I use the most in the classroom. When I'm in a physical classroom, I often rather than being at the front of the classroom and at a lectern, I'll sit down at one of the desks and just sit among the students as though I'm one of the peers, right? And especially if we're having conversations and they're supposed to be having conversations with each other and taking the conversation its own place, then I'll just sit back and watch. Right. And then I get to kind of, I instead of being the focus of the classroom, I let the students be the focus of the classroom. And then I get to participate in that. That's fun. That's fun for the students. And I get to do that too. Which is a blast. And they seem to think it's a blast too. Right. It's a very subtle shift in power dynamics. But rather than it being a thing where I'm the professor and they're the student and we've got to work with this dynamic, I put myself in a position where me and the students are in this together. And we're going to get through the material, right? We're in this together and we are going to learn this together. It's a subtle difference, but it's huge, right? And I keep meaning to fix this thing. Let me take a look and see if I can fix this fast. Oh, then it goes right over. which we don't want either. Okay, that's all right. We'll switch those right back to the way they were. But that's okay. Working in sales teaches super helpful skills and helps you to be more confident with discomfort. I guess that's true too. But my background in sales made it a lot easier for me to get up in front of a classroom of people I didn't know and confidently begin pretending like I was an authority on a bunch of stuff. Right? Because, I mean, I literally am, but sometimes you don't feel like it, especially when you're in front of a classroom of people. It's funny how making big sales and small transactions are successful, completely opposite tactics. Yes. Many salespeople take the advice for the wrong sales and misinterpret which they have in front of them. Oh, right. Advice for the wrong sale or misinterpret which they have in front of them. Absolutely. Detroit becomes student? I think that sounds like a joke, but I don't get it. But yeah, I'll get back to the video. It was a good aside.
What a standard of success it is to consider a crime solved once you sent a criminal to the school of crime we call prison, a place where people are treated like animals and thus filled with nothing done to alleviate the causes of crime in the first place. I wonder what happens next. And yet, despite this piss-poor performance, people still believe in the police. No matter how bad they are at their jobs, their myth proves more potent than their reality. People are comforted by the idea that there's this higher power that is fighting for them. The assumption being, of course, that the police are there to fight the bad guys. That those guns would never be turned on you. That those bad guys you fear will never seek the badge themselves. That your demographic won't be next. That falsified or withheld evidence, coerced or mistaken witnesses, and inadequate legal defense won't stand in the way of your freedom. That you'll never be locked up or worse in the name of law and order. The justice system not only fails to address the injustices within its purview, but also enables injustice. It might convict you for stealing a loaf of bread, but a capitalist can steal the future of the entire planet once they have the right paperwork. The state can limit your freedom of movement with a fresh piece of legislation. It'll throw you in prison and subject you to all manner of torture and abuse, but it's okay because it's legal torture and legal abuse. Still, pointing to the flaws of the current system is not an automatic win for anarchy. Criticism of the existing system doesn't make every alternative viable by default. There are more than two choices, and far be it from me to set up a false dichotomy. So how does anarchy deal with crime? It doesn't. The category of crime is a product of hierarchical social relations, specifically a legal order with the authority to categorize actions as either legal or illegal. Crime is defined as either an act which is prohibited by the laws of the state or any omission of an act mandated by the state, where this act or omission is subject to punishment by the state. So the concept of crime isn't compatible with anarchy. That's okay. Anarchists are not concerned with violations against the state anyway. We are, however, concerned with harm and harm reduction. We are concerned with the harm of slavery, whether the state deems it legal or not. We are concerned with the harm of pollution, whether it's allowed by law or not. We are concerned with the harm of killing, whether it is considered lawful or unlawful. There is no authority in anarchy that can prohibit harm, but that doesn't mean that everything is permitted, because there's no authority to permit harm either. Nothing is illegal and nothing is legal. In such an illegal environment, as anarchist Sean Wilbur puts it, our focus will necessarily shift from questions of law and order to considerations of expectations and consequences. People will still seek to preempt and resolve conflicts, and even develop norms and consequences.
I love this. I'm gonna have to go and check out
Environment,
this
anarchist
author.
Sean Wilbur puts it.
John Wilbur. I need to write this person's name down because illegal is an awesome term. As soon as I saw the word illegal, I was like, wait a minute. This is it. Y'all, my list of stuff to research is starting to get real long. Yeah, really. I'm really. I believe that I already know where we're about to go, but I find it very fascinating, and I'm really excited. If I'm right, that this is going to be really, really fun.
Our focus will necessarily shift from questions of law and order to considerations of expectations and consequences. People will still seek to preempt and resolve conflicts, and even develop norms and best practices, with the knowledge that everyone is expected to be responsible for their own behavior, because how they choose to act with their freedom will face responses, positive and negative, from those who are equally free. As Wilbur notes, whether people take the reduction of harm to be an ethical principle or simply a practical necessity of anarchic society, and ultimately however they individually define harm, the individual concern to avoid harm to oneself is likely to lead to a general social concern with the avoidance of harm. People may practice mediation when conflicts unfold, or engage in transformative justice when harm has been committed. Mediation is a voluntary conflict resolution approach that involves a mediator without a personal stake in the outcome, getting involved in a dispute between individuals or groups to aid them in reaching a mutually satisfactory decision. Transformative justice is a holistic approach that seeks to acknowledge the connections between individual and systemic forms of harm, based on 3 core principles. 1. Protecting the victim and providing them with the space to heal. 2. Protecting the overall community and providing it with the space to heal and reflect. And 3. Working collaboratively with the harmful actor.
Well, think about how this contrasts with the systems of quote-unquote justice that we have in place now. When somebody commits murder and the state locks up the murderer, they are not concerned with making the victim whole, right? And there's some of you might be like, well, if you've been murdered, you can't be made whole. there is a whole lot to say there about that. Yes, actually, if you have been murdered, you leave behind friends and family. A community has been harmed by the harm that has been done to you, and that should be addressed. That massive harm should be addressed. That should be what a justice system is interested in when there has been injustice. Ameliorating that injustice should probably be within the purview of the justice system, quote unquote justice system, right? The system will find someone to punish, but how does that ameliorate the harm that's been done? How does that protect the community? How does that ameliorate? How does that, what are we accomplishing, right? When we lock people up in jail, we know that we don't have a reformative system. We know that. We know that prisons don't reform criminals. That's not why we have prisons. Maybe if that was the part of the ethos of the prison in the first place, prisons wouldn't be so shit. But that's not part of the ethos of a prison. The function of prisons is to remove from society elements that society ought be shielded from, right? We're not trying to solve any problems. We're trying to sweep problems under the rug. That's what prisons are, is sweeping problems under the rugs, right? When we think about what crime is, right? I think Andrewism, of course, did a great job of making this what crime is a function of a state which identifies certain behaviors as not good for it. That's what crime is. Crime is what a state has designated is not good for it. And so crime is a function of state and statehood and stateness. But if we think about, if we try to expand upon that and think about crime as harms done to individuals, where was I going with that? Oh, then, right. When people act in ways that when people act in ways that society deems inappropriate, right? If we talk about crime in that kind of way. No, you're not derailing at all. If we're talking about crime in that kind of way, not in the formal something the state doesn't like. If we're talking about crime as harms done to individuals in a community, then we should be interested in what has caused individuals to act a certain way, right? We should be concerned with the root of the problem. If these individuals are exhibiting some kinds of behaviors that we find unsatisfactory, we should care about why those individuals are acting that way. We should seek out the source of that so that we can solve the problem at the root. Prisons aren't interested in that at all. Our justice system isn't interested in solving any problems, because problems need to be there in capitalism on purpose. It's not interested in solving any problems. It just wants to sweep the problems under the rug so that people who are maintaining the economy don't have to think about these things, aren't distracted by these things. That's the function of prisons, is so that the working class can go about being slaves for the bourgeoisie. That's why prisons exist, is so that when certain people who have been failed by society, when those people reject the social contract that has been given to them, we brush them aside and put them in prisons. We move them out of the way so that the economy doesn't suffer, so that productivity doesn't suffer, so that profitability doesn't suffer. That's the function of prisons. What we need is a preventative and transformative justice, neither of which we have. Our justice system now is not interested in accomplishing justice for anyone other than the state itself. We have had an expanded conversation about this. I forgot that we did a legal deep dive 2 or 3 months ago into all of the transphobic bills that were getting passed. I forgot that we had that deep dive. So we did. Okay, anyways. Absolutely.
To identify what is necessary to prevent further harm. Transformative justice can't be rushed for the sake of peace. It can be exhausting or even endangering if not carefully practiced. It is not easy work, especially when complicated by popularity or privilege. And most importantly, it doesn't apply to every situation. We'll get into that more a bit later. I wish there was an easy answer, but there will never be a single, all-encompassing solution to every instance of harm forever. Thankfully, certain kinds of harm that may be prevalent today, like theft, may be greatly reduced thanks to people's needs being met in anarchy. Through social revolution, through breaking down prejudices and stigmas, restoring the commons and networks of care, and empowering people to control their own lives, we can address poverty, relative deprivation, lack of education, and many of the other roots of today's crime. Not to mention all the non-criminalized systemic harm that will become impossible to maintain in the absence of authority, like capitalist exploitation. Interpersonal prejudices might persist and must constantly be opposed, but without authority, the worst excesses of discrimination, such as in housing, can be far more easily addressed. We can further reduce harm through the development of consultative associations, groups that are formed around a shared interest in gathering and disseminating information to inform people's decisions.
This is how I see societies working democratically without requiring democratic process from everyone. Some people will really just be super interested in water purification and how we go about doing that and what we should do. And they will just naturally be drawn to that and will form into coalitions of people who organize themselves in ways that grapple with those concerns, while the rest of us don't care. Because I don't really, as long as there are competent, intelligent people working on water systems, cool. I'm happy with that. I don't need to be a part of that process, right? There would be a whole bunch of people who are really concerned about roads and how they get built and where and when and how. And that's cool, right? I don't need to be a part of that process. I will happily be a part of that process if you need me to be. Right? Come and knock on my door. I'll help you shovel some gravel, or I'll help you troubleshoot. I'll help you figure out what we need to do so that I can have a road too. I will happily take part in whatever it is that I need to do to help make that there are roads. But I don't want to be in all of the decision-making process of what kind of material we use and what kind of ratios and right, there are a lot of things that I'm not going to be interested in, that not everybody is going to be interested in. Cis people generally should not decide in trans issues, right? That is a good example, I think. Right.
Shared interest in gathering and disseminating information to inform people's decisions. One such association may focus on developing food safety standards. Another may seek to gather data on local resource limits. Yet another may investigate instances of harm with no clear culprit to gather the facts of each case. But ultimately, no matter how culprit to gather the facts of each case.
Not police. Investigating harms with no clear culprit to gather the facts of each case is not what police do. Anyone can do this. This is investigation. This is an investigation. Anyone can do this. Police don't generally do this. Though this is a thing that we leave up to the police, they generally don't. Anybody could, but if you want someone to do this, you typically have to pay money for a private investigator who will do this. Because police don't do this.
But ultimately, no matter how socioeconomically just our world becomes, we'll still have to deal with harm, because no system can entirely eliminate harm. We can do better than the law does because the law is a particularly flawed way of dealing with harm, way too inflexible for the messy complexities of reality, and too rigid for the nuances of each specific case. But even if we make the world a better place for all and eliminate most causes of criminality, even if we counteract and deconstruct many of the harmful ideologies that exist today, we will still have to deal with some percentage of simply bad people. Defining bad people is an inherently flawed and subjective exercise. But if we have to use such an overly simplistic term, I'd say that from my perspective, bad person isn't a fixed identity, but a section on a spectrum of actions and ideologies that I consider actively harmful. A bad person is someone who consistently and deliberately harms others, ignores consent, refuses accountability, and upholds systems of domination. Those who derive pleasure from the death and suffering of others. Those who seize petty or grand positions of authority to dominate others with impunity. Those who use and abuse others, sexually or otherwise. Our social conditions play a major role in who people become. So by transforming our conditions, we can expect to reduce the number of bad people that emerge in our world. But despite our changes to the system,
I want to ask you all, I know this is going to be a little bit of a side, but is this hopelessly optimistic? Right? The idea that if we build a better society, that society will make less people that aren't good people, right? If we make society better, that society will make people, and those people will not be as bad. I think that follows. Is this naive optimism to believe that we can hope, right? See, I thought that you were gonna have somebody was gonna have that take, right? Okay, good, Jane. Fascists will always exist. I don't believe that, and what the reason why I'm asking is not because I want an argument, but I want to know, or I want to feel through the idea of what that means, right? That fascists will always exist, because I believe that it is that if we made society the right way, I believe that fascists would not exist, could not exist in a society that was organized well, organized the right way. Um, and that's the thing. So there's a question here of whether or not fascism or some other kind of ill, some other kind of evil, some other kind of bad is necessarily inherent in the human condition. Because that's really what the question is. Nature versus nurture is one of the oldest quandaries. Oh, you want to fight? We know you were stressed this morning and decided to stream and choose violence with chat. Sometimes I choose violence. What can I say? I believe that most 90% of people aren't that entrenched in oppressive thought. Right. See, there's this friend of mine that I have lots of long, deep conversations with. Every time we're together, we just have lots of long, deep conversation. And where we disagree the most, fundamentally, is this question. That this person that I'm talking about believes that police are necessary. That society has evolved to have police as a response to the fact that humans are necessarily going to have bad. That some bad people are going to just be irredeemably, incorrigibly bad. So we have to have police. And I don't believe that that's the case.
Fuck the police! They can't control! We gotta take it back! Everyone get up and let's go!
Yes, police were invented to catch slaves. Well, yes, there is an extra caveat to this. And now is an appropriate time, I think, to throw that out. Police in the United States was an invention to catch enslaved peoples. Right. That is true. But we can actually trace back instances of constables or what's the other word? There's another C word for a certain kind of function in society where there is a certain power given a certain class of people that predates that. If we want to trace back the origins of policing in America, yeah, it's slave catchers, but such similar things have existed previously, before then, and in a bunch of different kinds of ways, too. Where was I going with that? There was a reason I was given a slight pushback on that, and now I don't remember what it is. Welcome in, Trash Demancer. It's good to see you. I'll just say hi to you instead. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're doing well. Different authority and scope, same job, right? And there, I think that there's some value to right. I don't want to. Before I get too far, I want to say that this framing that Matt's using is good and helpful. When I think that this is always a good point to bring up when we're talking about police and policing. I think this is always a good point, especially in the context of our material conditions here in the United States. Oh, right. That's what I was going to. Is that there if right. Because the question has to do with whether people are inherently bad. Right. So I believe that this is one of my beliefs, and grains of salt here. I don't have statistics or data or research to back up this belief, but I have this belief. And the belief is that the erosion of our ability to protect ourselves and each other is directly tied to formal institutions like policing that trace back even further. When we adopt an attitude that somebody else should be the arbiter of peace in our communities, we are making a mistake. We are responsible for peace and the well-being of beings in our communities. Despite this, most of us call the police and believe that it's someone else's responsibility to deal with that person who's breaking into the neighbor's house, to deal with those people who are fighting on the street corner, to deal with the fact that I believe that that spouse might be abusing that other spouse, right? We call the police instead of being concerned members of our own moral communities, which is literally our responsibility as members of those moral communities. That's your fucking job. You are supposed to be doing that. But it's not your fault that you don't. And it's not your fault that you don't recognize that responsibility, because you have always existed in a system where it is not your responsibility. And in fact, you are not allowed to interfere with your neighbor. That person who's breaking into your neighbor's house, if you interfere with them, you are violating the law. If you are concerned about those people fighting on the street corner and you step in and intervene, you are breaking the law. If you're concerned about that spouse maybe is abusing the other spouse and you go stick your nose in it, you are not allowed to do that. And in our communities have become conditioned to lack the ability to self-defend. This is a very important aspect of living in a community. So many things at once. Okay, we'll get there. A good example of this. Oh, I've mentioned this before. With the Black Panthers, right? The Black Panther community. One of the very first things that they did was kick out the police and began to regulate themselves to deal with these kinds of things, to deal with abusive spouses, to deal with sexual assault, to deal with theft and these other kinds of issues in ways that the police don't, right? Because they don't. The police institution as a police don't solve these problems. They don't prevent people from doing crimes, and they don't give society any kind of valuable recourse when crimes have been committed. It's not the function of police. That's not why they exist. Police exist to protect capital and insulate those in power from accountability. It's no wonder they don't solve any of our other problems. Not what they exist for. Right? But this is kind of an aside, and this is an aside of an aside of an aside now at this point. But the aside to the aside is that no, I'm trying to bring it all full circle. There's too many things in my brain at once. I'm sorry. I can't say it all at once, and because it's so much, I can't figure out how to begin. Okay. Okay, so. Right. There is a material reality that is true about the world. That is, we are members of our moral communities, and that we, as members of our moral communities, have duties and responsibilities to and in that community. This is a real truth that is really real about the world. This is real. We are divorced epistemologically and materially from this reality, such that we don't even realize that this very real thing that is very real, that we are members of moral communities and have, as such, we have duties and responsibilities in and to that moral community. This is a real material thing. We are divorced from this. We are divorced from this, and we don't even know. We can't even understand this truth because of policing, because of these institutions, because of the way that the state has monopolized violence, right? The state holds a monopoly on violence, and as such, we have become conditioned over the last few hundred years. And if we expand the definition of policing, the last 1,500 years, at least, to be the kind of people who don't solve their own problems, who don't understand that it is our responsibility to solve our own problems, that is a materially real thing about the world. We're divorced from that because of the kind of society that we live in. Is a good way to start to get where I'm going. Let me get caught up on chat. Took me a minute to figure out where I was trying to go there. Which police were just there to serve court orders like a constable. Right. Constabulary. Right. The functions of a constabulary force is probably more reasonable. Police investigate and respond to emergencies, though. Emergencies too. I missed this. I would like to suggest people who think nature has more to do with outcomes than nurturing likely are looking for excuses for their social abuses. Well, but I'm not so quick to I just don't know. Trash, no answer. I was gonna try and push back, but then I'm just like I just really don't know. I think that could be the case. But it's all so much more complicated. I'll put a pin in that. I'll come back to that in a second. Oh, that's responding to you. I was like, I didn't put anything in chat, but anyways, authorities are agents of alienation. Authorities? Wow. I love the simplicity of this statement and just how much substance is in the statement. Authorities are agents of alienation. Yeah. In almost all cases, I have thought of a few exceptions, but those exceptions aren't really that important. But that's good. And that aside, Rubik and Rubik's cubicides. Thank you, Jane. Yeah, for catching the they. Yeah, no worries. Um, right. Right. Um, so carrying the thought on. Right. So, and that's no and to be clear, right? Because I'm still hoping that um that we can push back on this. Um, Jane is trying to push back on my idea, and I'm hoping that that we can push on this more. Um, my belief. Let's go back to my belief. The belief that I have. I believe that um, policing as an institution interferes with the ability for moral agents to recognize their moral responsibility to their moral community. And that this lack of responsibility, or this lack of recognition of responsibility, is largely responsible for the elements that we see in humans that we think of as criminal behaviors, as antisocial behaviors, because that's really what it is. When we're talking about crime, that falls in this category that the video is talking about, right? We're talking about a subset of human behaviors that are antithetical to the peaceful existence of the state. That's what crime is, right? That Andrewism is talking about. This narrower definition of social deviance, right? But if we contrast this with antisocial behaviors, which is what we as a culture and society should be punishing, is antisocial behaviors. And we shouldn't be punishing it necessarily with monetary fines or with jail time. We should be punishing antisocial behavior with social responses, like societies have done for hundreds of thousands of years. Before we invented police, the subset of individuals within our society that has the right to abuse the rest of us, seems like kind of a fucked up solution to the problem, when we could just use the levers of society like societies have for hundreds of thousands of years to deal with the same problem. But we can't. We can't, because the institution of policing exists and is necessary for the existence of the state. Right? So long as we have a state, we are going to have the police. So long as we have the police, we are not going to be masters of our moral community, is what I was going to say. Then that didn't feel right. But now that I've said it out loud, that really doesn't seem wrong. That we should be masters of our moral communities. Right, so, yeah, anti-cooperative behavior, yes. There's, so, and like, let's, because it's so hard to think about crime in a really just society, because in a just society, there is no theft. Not because there's no such thing as personal property, but in a just society, nobody has any need. So if somebody takes something that somebody else is using, it was probably just an oversight or an accident or something that just needs some explanation, right? That's something that we would put words to so that all of the members involved better understand the situation now, rather than punishing anybody for taking what's not theirs. Because in a just society, everybody only owns because of society, right? In a just society, you have things, and the things that you only have because of the justness of the society in which you live. We don't live in a just society. Right now, people own things, and they own things because they've exploited, because they have coerced, because they have abused, because they have done harm to other people, or they have done harm to society itself. In our society, to own, you own because you have done harm, because you have exploited, because you have abused, because you have extrapolated, because you have done evil to get that stuff. In a just society, you own things, and you own those things only because the society is just and has given those things to you. And that doesn't mean that you haven't done work to get them either. It's not a purely binary thing. It's not as though you have things and either they were given to you or you got them yourselves. Most things don't fit into neat categories materially, right? The education that you have is in part the product of your own combined labor, but has to do with the professors and the teachers and the other scholars that have come before you, that have guided your path, that have shown you and exposed certain ideas to you. The authors that have written the books that you have learned from, right? You learned your knowledge, but from other people. You don't just get knowledge. You don't just hammer out some knowledge. Knowledge is a product of your relationship to others in the world with you. Even if some of those others are already dead and have passed on their knowledge in books or whatever other kind of medium. I don't believe in property. I also don't think that property is a right in that way, and I think that's what you meant, Jane. That I don't believe in property. Right. I think that there is. Well, we don't have to have an expanded. We've talked about that quite a great deal. The distinction between personal, private property, and different kinds of property, and the different ways that we can think about them. I think that property isn't a right to anyone, and it's much like a privilege. And that's the thing that we've talked about before is that if a thing can be a right, then you have access to it, and your access to it does not interfere with other people's access to that same right. This must necessarily, categorically be true about that thing, or it's not a right. Right? You don't have the right to impose on others, or to take from others, or to interfere with their autonomy, because that right would mean that others could do that to you, right? To interfere with your right to do that, right? It is self-defeating in itself. rationally, it is incoherent as an idea. And property is that same kind of thing. If you have that, but I have a right to it, how can it be that you have it and I have a right to it unless I can just go get it? Unless I can just go take it. And if I can just go take it, then what happens to your right to have it? Right? And because then my right to have it is interfered with your right to come and just take it. Nothing about property works in the way that rights are supposed to work with how we think about them. Yeah, I believe in possession of things, not property. And that's that is a much better way to put it, Jane. I like that a lot. It reminds me of I don't want to make broad strokes, so I'll talk specifically about Chakoshan values. When it comes to stuff, in the Chakosha worldview, the matriarch of a household is responsible for possessions, cooking pots and sewing needles and the skins that everybody uses to stay warm and the teepee itself. These are possessions that are the responsibility of the matriarch of a household or of a family, or right. And the matriarch doesn't own them. The matriarch is responsible as their caregiver, is the one who is in charge of them. So is the possessor of those things, but they don't possess those things in a closed off way. They are the ones who make sure that those things are where they need to be so that everybody who needs those things can always have access to those things. They are the possessor of the things. And it's not the same as ownership in our Western conception of thinking about having the items. It's something that comes with responsibilities and duties. It's something that is a mantle to be taken up, rather than something that somebody takes on to themselves. It's something that somebody holds up for everybody else. It is kind of a mutual aid thing. They care for the things that care for they care for the things that care for the community. Yes, absolutely. And it is. The possession is a relationship that comes with responsibility. Care for that. Even to and this it's been a long time since I've well, I don't want to just make up stuff that I'm not sure about, so we'll just leave it there. But yes, possession comes with responsibility, and that's or stewardship. That's the word I'm looking for. Possession comes with stewardship. If it is in your care, it's not because you're the owner of it. It's because you need to do something to maintain and protect and preserve that thing. It's your responsibility so that this thing exists for the needs, of the need, right, of the thing. Oh, I missed this. We institutionalize the right of violence. Institutionalize the right of violence up the public for fear. Oh, I gotcha. There's a word not right here. We institutionalize the right of violence of the public. I think for fear of violence from the seems counterproductive. Yes. Well, it is, but not. It's yeah. Maybe alleviate the reasons folk have those dysfunction outbursts. Maybe some folk don't feel need and the need to compete. They wouldn't dysfunction as much. Right. Right. If people didn't have the need to compete with each other, there would be less dysfunction. Right. And that was way back. I didn't realize how far back that was. Trash. I didn't mean to miss your comment. It's a good comment, but it's a little bit dated now. Not dated, but yes. Stewards of the means of production. Yes. Yes. Well, and that's so much yes. So much yes, actually. Stewards of the means of production. Because the workers have them already. Right? The workers have them already. They just need to care for them responsibly. So much yes that. Eye for eye stuff seems if we avoided the loss of the first eye in the first place. Yes, well, but that traces, but that's the link. What is the thing? The turtle on top of the turtle. The chain before the chain. What is this called? The processions. And we can't stop tracing it back. Well, I guess that doesn't matter. The objection that I was about to raise doesn't matter anyway, because it really is inconsequential. It's privileging. It doesn't matter. I didn't make the argument. I don't have to disprove the argument. But yeah, because it's we institutionalize the right of violence, but yes. So there's how do I want to unpack this? Because it is very eye for eye. There is a trash no answer. The eye for eye aspect is there, and I get it. I get what you're saying. What's my objection? What is my objection, self? What is my objection? The objection is, right. Okay. My problem, no, not problem. My objection is that to derail eye for an eye becoming eye for an eye for an eye for an eye for infinity, to derail that, to prevent that from continuing as a cycle, requires some kind of concession that no one is willing to give. Which is why the state is there, right? That's because the state can step in and be the arbiter that says, no, the violence stops here. That I hate where I'm going with this. I don't like where I'm going with this, but and the means of production are still just nature formed into a tool or factory. Thank you, Kai Matara, for bringing that point back up and making sure that we've got that material dialectic that constantly reoccurring. Thank you, because that's exactly right, and exactly the right point in the conversation for that to be brought back up. The means of production are still nature, just formed into a tool or factory. The San of the Calamari are the oldest extant practicing culture that we know of, and how they organize themselves is amazing. Practice of insulting the meat, that is a built-in way of instilling humility in their culture. You insult the meat, a practice of insulting the meat. That's interesting. Yeah, we cannot prevent all events, but we can help minimize the nucleation points. Having a proactive, accepting, and nurturing culture, and more equal distractions with more equal would absolutely reduce conflict issues. We could have the first eye taker do something that make up for the action in another way. Well, that's I think that the problem I'm having, because it's there is a problem. I think that the problem that I'm having with the way that this is getting framed is finally, okay, I just figured it out. I figured out what the problem is. Okay. So, wait. Right. So, the eye for an eye is it's problematic framing. That's the issue that I'm having. Is it's problematic framing from the get-go. And that's not your fault, Trashnomancer. No slight on you. The language and the framework that you're using to discuss these ideas are traditional. These are the tools that we're used to using to have these kinds of conversations. The problem that I see is that the eye for an eye framework presupposes a disconnect in moral responsibility in the first place. What I mean is, let's okay. Thinking about justice from an eye for an eye perspective implies necessarily that I can do harm to you, that I can do something harmful to you that doesn't harm me, which isn't actually possible. Right. So there is the Aristotelian idea that I've brought up before, where I live in a society, and if I harm that society, or if I harm any member of that society that I am in, I am worse off. Right? This is an Aristotelian idea. Aristotle didn't think that it was necessary to build into his ethics any kind of impartiality, that we treat each other with basic respect. Aristotle didn't feel the need to bake this into his ethics because he didn't think it was necessary. It becomes necessary in later rationalistic frameworks, which presuppose this relationship that I've talked about before, where the individual and the state are in an antagonistic relationship. And as another part of this that I haven't talked about, in this relationship, it also presupposes that this individual's interests are also antagonistic with all of the other interests of all the other people in society. It presupposes a competitive society, a dog-eat-dog world in which there is a zero-sum game where we are vying for positions with each other. Right? This is all baked into the eye for an eye thinking about justice, which shouldn't be necessary. None of this should be necessary, because if we understand harm correctly, if I harm you and you are a member of the society in which I live, I have harmed myself. Necessarily. This is actually materially true about the world, but we pretend that it's not, or that people can get away with this kind of thing, and that it doesn't matter. Because people are insulated from this kind of accountability with enough money. They can insulate themselves from the harms that are being done to society around them by capitalism by having enough money. But there's another, and I'm a little bit surprised that Kayamatara hasn't chimed in to include this aspect of the dialectics yet. If I harm you, I am also directly doing harm to me as the one doing harm, because I have a dialectical material relationship with the world. I can't touch the world without being touched. Right? This is the soldier who survives war example. Right? The soldier who is in war and has to brutalize the soldiers on the other side of the battlefield so that they can survive. Their survival does them harm. That they do harm to those other soldiers so that they can live does harm to them. They harm themselves in the brutalization of other humans so that they can survive. It's an unavoidable consequence. If you brutalize somebody else, you are doing something to yourself. And what you're doing to yourself isn't good. Moral responsibility is sort of a first world problem, but no, still think we can find ways to do restorative justice for the victim, society around them, and also the offender. Okay. Seem to have the same issue with eye for an eye kind of justice philosophy. As the line goes, eye for an eye leaves the world blind. And that's that was the tough thing, right? I knew that I wasn't trying to push back on you, Trash Nomancer. I wasn't trying to push back on your ideas or what you were saying. But I wanted to, but I needed to push back, and I couldn't. It took me a long time to figure out how to push back, and this is why, or it's not popped up yet. It'll pop up in a minute. So it's the eye for an eye justice philosophy, as the line goes. Eye for an eye leaves the world blind. Right? We are in our justice system now is a mechanism for determining whose eyes get poked out. Just think about that for a second. Our justice system right now is a formalized mechanism for determining whose eyes get poked out. Now, we don't need... Our society doesn't actually need people to be blind. Doesn't need people's eyes poked out. What the justice system in our society is doing isn't something that benefits our society. Actually. You see it in PTSD in soldiers, even those who went in and came out thinking they did the right thing. Oh, and especially, actually, right? Exactly, Kaimatara. Exactly. In America, it is poking out the wrong eyes most of the time. Right. The people who are already the most disadvantaged. And this is something that it's retribution and it's punity, and it is so almost arbitrarily, right? The system just picks winners and losers. When you think about I think about this a lot when it comes to the individual police officer. What it is that an individual police officer does, what they accomplish with their time and energy and effort. What that individual police officer does is they are a Russian roulette selector for putting a bullet in somebody. All the fucking time. They are just randomly pulling people over to ruin their lives, to interfere with those people's lives, just to cost those people a huge amount of time, a huge amount of money, a huge amount of effort, arbitrarily. That's when you look at what an individual police officer does, a traffic cop who is pulling people over because they've got their blinker doesn't work, or because their headlighter is out, or because they're driving with a suspended license, or they're driving without insurance, the police are it's Russian roulette. They are just randomly finding people for the system to crush. That's what they are doing. It's really hard when people are like, but police are good, but this cop is a good person. What the fuck is wrong with you? How can your understanding of the world be so fucked up that when you see police pull people over to ruin their lives, that's what they're doing, is ruining people's lives? How can you think that's good for anybody? Sorry, sometimes it's just the anger gets on top of me. Institution of pointy eye sticks sounds like a bunch of sticks. What's that called again? We have it in our courthouses. Usually has an axe in the bundle. What's that called? I like that imagery, Trash Nomancer. Holy shit. I really like that imagery, Trash Nomancer. the institution of pointy eye sticks. I mean, linguistically, visually, that just works. That's beautiful. We need eye for an eye. We need eye to eye rather than eye for an eye. There's a great TED Talk on anti-authority by Tame Inti, probably. I'm guessing, I'm brutalizing somebody's name. Pointing out the power of Kanori ki te kanoi. Tangata ki te tangata. Good. I'm going to go ahead and open that up too. Still haven't finished the video that I'm supposed to be watching. What about all the protesters brutalized? Right? Don't be afraid to challenge someone trying to assert authority over you. Just because someone has authority doesn't mean that they have more mana. If someone is asserting their authority, they have to let go of respect. They have to let go of respect and understanding to get their way. Wow. If someone is asserting their authority, they have to let go of respect and understanding to get their way. And you are no longer equal. Wow, I really like that a lot. Where does fasces? You don't know. It's a common iconography in American courthouses. It's a Roman thing. Yeah. I would imagine, Trash, that I think most people are familiar with the imagery of fascism. But if not, then thank you for filling that in. Look it up. It's a bunch of pointy sticks waiting to poke eyes out. Right, I wasn't done with my because this is still just an aside. We're in the middle of watching that Andrewism video. It's the aside of an aside still. We're coming back. We're working our way back to what brought us on the tangent. Oh, right. Whether so okay. Good. Rather than me trying to yeah, where were we again? Rather than trying to go the long way back around to bring everything back full circle. What started this whole tangent, my whole tangent, was my belief that bad is something that can be conditioned out of the human condition. I think that there is a way that we can make society such that society produces better people, and that those better people are not going to need courthouses and jail cells or police. But I don't know how better to phrase this other than to just say this. That I'm glad that there's pushback against that idea in the chat, And I hope that there continues to be pushback against that idea. Not because I don't want there to be hope. Not because I want to be wrong. But because I want my belief to not be naive. I want truth. And that will require plurality. That will require all of us. Right. What I mean is that I have a belief, but I don't believe that the belief that I have is sufficient, is robust enough. I don't believe that my belief has been well tested against the antithesis that you all will bring to this idea that humanity is redeemable from evil, that we can build a society in which there are no fascists. We can build a society in which there are no rapists. We can build a society in which there are no sexists or racists. I believe that such a thing is possible. But I want that belief to be a tested belief that has been pressed against over and over and over and over again, with the antithesis that maybe there are elements of humanity that we don't properly understand. Right? Can greatly reduce the amount of oppressive forces, but outright elimination may be impossible. And see, that's it might be. And I don't want you to stop pushing back on that, Chris Chaos. I don't want you to stop pushing back on that. Yeah, I think, okay, so, and it was, I knew it was going to be an aside. I didn't expect it to be like a whole ass hour an aside, but I knew that was going to be kind of a long conversation, and it's a conversation that I think I'm probably going to pick up again later, where I'm going to want to talk a little bit more in depth about that which is necessarily essential for humanity. But that's not where we're going today, and that's not going to get us where we're going today. So, thank you everybody for humoring my aside. Let's get back to the video.
Social conditions play a major role in who people become. So by transforming our conditions, we can expect to reduce the number of bad people that emerge in our world. But despite our changes to the system reducing their prevalence, there may always be some fraction of the populace whose commitments to cruelty, domination, and manipulation are too deeply entrenched and immune to change. People like the mystery killer at the beginning of this video. In anarchist William Gillis's essay on bad people, he describes them as people who are not just merely passing through badness, but who have taken it in and bonded to it. The state cannot protect us from these people. It's a comforting fantasy, but it falls apart with the understanding that those same bad people we fear are likely to pursue those positions of power to extend their ability to harm. Rapists and
I didn't realize I wasn't muted. And our society now is more likely to reward those people who are doing those bad things in the evil, bad way, because that's the kind of society that we have.
Serial killers who are protected by the badge or the office they hold. Many arguments have been made for ACAB, but I appreciate Gillis's argument that policing attracts rot. The role of the police is to preserve simplistic hierarchies and rules with violence, to maintain order, that is to say, to make the world legible to the simple-minded, and to exercise unrivaled brute force to make this so. If police are bureaucrats with guns, as David Graeber puts it, they are so both to serve our highest rulers, and because a great many more, in hunger for simplicity, allow issues of conflict and security to be offloaded upon a very small number of people who are almost uncheckable. The role of policing attracts, facilitates, and is best performed by pre-existing bad people. Any serious harm reduction strategy must seek to make authority impossible. In a world without authority, we have to deal with bad people ourselves. With that in mind, welcome to game theory. But not that game theory. Game theory is a field of study. A few months ago, I watched a video by Veritasium which presented an approach to the famous prisoner's dilemma in a way that affirms a key component of the anarchist strategy for resisting bad people. I'll let Veritasium explain the premise and then summarize the full video. Link below.
So, let's play a game.
A banker with a chest full of gold coins invites you and another player to play against each other. You each get two choices. You can cooperate or you can defect. If you both cooperate, you each get 3 coins. If one of you cooperates but the other defects, then the one who defected gets 5 coins and the other gets nothing. And if you both defect, then you each get a coin. The goal of the game is simple, to get as many coins as you can.
So, what would you do?
Suppose your opponent cooperates, then you could also cooperate and get 3 coins. Or you could defect and get 5 coins instead, so you are better off defecting. But what if your opponent defects instead? Well, you could cooperate and get no coins, or you could defect and at least get 1 coin. So no matter what your opponent does, your best option is always to defect.
Now, if your opponent is also rational, they will reach the same conclusion and therefore also defect.
As a result, when you both act rationally, you both end up in the suboptimal situation getting 1 coin each, when you could have gotten 3 instead.
The thing about a lot of problems is that they're not a single prisoner's dilemma.
Impalas see each other day after day, and the same situation keeps happening over and over again. So that changes the problem. Because instead of playing the prisoner's dilemma just once, you're now playing it many, many times. And if I defect now, then my opponent will know that I defected, and they can use that against me in the future. So, what is the best strategy in this repeated game?
The rest of the video is spent exploring the studies done by Robert Axelrod to find the best strategies for success in such a game. He ran tournaments that tested every strategy against every other strategy to see who would win overall. In the first tournament, each strategy played 200 rounds with every other strategy, and the simplest strategy, tit for tat, won. Tit for tat starts every game with cooperation and then mirrors its opponent's previous move. In addition to tit for tat, Axelrod found that strategies that were nice, meaning they sought cooperation and didn't defect first, tended to perform better than the nasty strategies, which defected first. But they weren't just nice, they were also retaliatory, meaning they punished defection quickly, forgiving, meaning they didn't hold a grudge, and clear, meaning predictable and understandable. In the second tournament, new strategies were submitted, but once again tit for tat won, and most top strategies were nice and forgiving. When Axelrod ran a simulation that mimicked natural selection, successful strategies, which were almost all nice, multiplied, while nasty ones faded over time. The nasty ones that didn't go entirely extinct plummeted in numbers. Tit for tat initially struggled in one of Axelrod's experiments when he attempted to account for the noise of real life, where mistakes and misunderstandings can happen. But a simple tweak to its strategy to make it slightly more forgiving enabled it to break the cycle of retaliation and perform much better. In other words, occasionally turning the other cheek can disrupt negative spirals. So, what does this have to do with anarchy? Here's where Gillis provides some additional insights. This time in his...
See, and that's part of what I was trying to butt up against in our earlier conversation was that the tit for tat or eye for eye, for that escalation to de-escalate, it requires someone to forgive. It requires somebody to intercede. It requires somebody to be the bigger person, or to whatever. And that a system that requires that is flawed. Right? The system should work itself out. It shouldn't need something to intercede and interrupt the spiral. Systems for justice shouldn't be able to spiral in the first place. I think is part of the issue that I was having.
This article, What's in a Slogan? In predominantly cooperative mixed strategy systems, some parasitic or predatory strategies may persist on the fringes, the bad people. But the most effective long-term strategies not only maintain cooperation and retaliate to harm against themselves, but also retaliate in cases of harm against others. In other words, radical solidarity. Of course, as Gillis points out, anthropologists didn't need fancy simulations to discover this reality. They just talked to people living in stateless societies. Anarchy is not merely a stateless society, but I believe we can expect similar or even more proactive strategies to arise. Remember those traits for success? They're nice, retaliatory, forgiving, and clear. Similarly, in anarchy, we can expect cooperation, rehabilitation, and clear expectations and consequences. It may be in our best interest in most cases to de-escalate conflict and explore other options, since acting recklessly may only create further harm, but sometimes we may decide to consciously cause harm in response to harm. As Wilbur put it, in those instances where the conscious use of harm to prevent further harm seems to be, in the specific context, the only option that appears open to us, presumably we will remain faithful enough to our analysis not to pretend that even necessity can authorize our actions. Like any other action in anarchy, self-defense can be neither legal nor illegal. Ultimately, as I said before, each act is taken of one's own responsibility. There is no law or authority or majority approval that can absolve you of that responsibility for your actions.
Right. And not even necessity. I really like that. That's probably a point that I would have missed in this analysis had it not been explicitly pointed out. Is that you can't appeal to necessity, and by that I mean there's lots of situations. It's this is where we would say, okay, your individual concern is cute or fine or whatever, but this is what we need to do for us to be successful. No justice system. And this is why earlier at the very beginning of the stream when we were talking, I said that I don't think that we can systematize or framework our way out of our problems, out of these particular problems that we have. I think that the solution is always in the nuance and is always going to require human patience and understanding that cannot be frameworked, that can't be systematized, that can't be put into any kind of formal process. It requires a thoughtful, critical, caring mind, right? And probably lots of thoughtful, critical, caring minds for us to solve these kinds of problems. And for exactly this reason. Another thing that I want to point out about this real quick is this point of putting necessity above morality is what Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil is actually all about. I don't have to pull up the book. It's the human tendency for those in power, especially those who are in control of the levers of the state and of governments, for those people to prioritize need over compassion. Need for the system, need for solidarity, need for peace, need for cohesion, whatever the need is. We build society in a way that we pretend that certain things are beyond good and evil. That's what the title of the book is about, is that people put arbitrarily and always erroneously put other considerations beyond the evaluation of good or evil, right? This is where we look at things which are good or evil. We believe that there are some things which are necessary, so we don't allow those to enter into our moral analysis. These necessary things are capitalism, private property, exploitation. These necessary things, right, are beyond good and evil, which is actually the point of that work. Anyways, that I thought that was a valuable aside there. We need to stop the terrorist is often a false premise. Right? We need to stop the terrorists. Yes, what a great example. Thank you, Kaimatara, for coming up with what a great example. Even if it was a legitimate concern, good intentions alone doesn't shrink a blast radius. Right. Or absolve you of the innocents that are the collateral damage, or the flagrant disregard for due process, right? These things, this is something. You remember when I blamed everything on Obama? All of our descent right now into fascism, the super fast, slippery slope that we are on right now, is Obama's fault. For skirting due process, and by bombing United States citizens on foreign soil without due process, Barack Obama set a precedent that governments, especially the United States governments, can prioritize need over rights, over morality, over you, over the citizens, literally. Right, that what a great example. That really does tie it in. Clinton didn't help either, but yeah. Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. So, good, Matt. That's good. Let's flesh that out just a little bit more, because at the end of Bill Clinton's presidency, there was a large conversation that happened in the Democratic wing where they were like, "Hey, we're not going to get the presidency again. Maybe we should consider curbing some of the powers of the executive branch. Maybe we should consider, maybe we ought to rein in some of these powers, and we should really rethink the relationships of the system of checks and balances." And then people were like, "Yeah, but we're going to be in office again later, and we're going to want to abuse those powers. So let's not do anything." And that's why we're here. Fast forward, and now here we are. Trump still hasn't used the extrajudicial assassination of United States citizens abroad. No, so far as I know, he hasn't yet. But there might be situations in which it has happened. and it's not public knowledge yet. And I'm not sure, but from my understanding, not yet. We should instead stop terrorism from uprising to begin with. Well, that's yes, but that's a complicated thing. Getting to the root of terrorism is a lot of ways is kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I'm actually thinking of Oedipus, the story of Oedipus, in somebody trying to go so far out of their way to avoid the thing that they're causing the thing, because most of what I don't know, maybe it's a problem that has become exponentially worse that wouldn't necessarily. But we are in a state now where when we try to do acts, and those acts are intended to curb or ameliorate terrorism, what we do is make everything worse. We just make more terrorists. But I don't know. It's hard to take seriously the initiatives of the United States, right? When they claim that they are going out with the intended intent of curbing terrorism, really what they're trying to do is insert their own state power into the affairs of some other nations. That really all they care about is their own profit and benefit, rather than trying to actually make the world a better place. So, I mean, I don't know. Should we maybe define terrorism and its boundaries first? I think that would be necessary to have an expounded conversation really exploring that, yeah. I think that we would have to have a much more nuanced conversation about how, because this is a class thing, social deviance. Sometimes social deviance is considered beneficial and good. Sometimes social deviance is considered terrorism. And how deviance gets characterized and categorized is really kind of complicated, and a lot of times meaningless, or arbitrary. That's not meaningless, and a lot of times arbitrary. The categorizations and the classifications that are given between combatant versus non-combatant, or civilian or non-civilian, or there's the way that nuance gets added to those things often doesn't really add much moral clarity, is what I mean. When you get more nuanced, you just find more problematic value frameworks, rather than getting anywhere productive. Killed quite a few non-citizen civilians abroad. Okay. The definition of terrorism, and changes based on who we're talking about. Yeah. And it's Antifa. Antifa is considered a terrorist organization, right? That's a completely incoherent idea. It's absurd beyond belief, but here we are. It is real. Despite the fact that it is wildly absurd, it is real. So how terrorism gets classified is definition courts go with are essentially against Western interests. Yeah, anything that's against Western interest is classified as terrorism. Some may say propaganda of the deed is a form of terrorism. Yeah, and that's feeding people, right? That's that. Yes, Jane. Yes. That's or if you think about well, no, that's not as good an example. Your example is better than mine. Never mind. But no, I think that's a really good point. Some say propaganda of the deed is a form of terrorism, and most of it will be considered, right? If you're housing people and you're feeding people and you're doing things to actually secure freedoms, you will absolutely be labeled as a deviant by the system and probably be labeled as a terrorist, I would imagine. Right, so feel free, everyone, to continue the conversation about terrorism if you want to unpack the terrorism thing more. I don't think I'm interested in pursuing that. Not right now, not today. I think that we all understand that there's a lot of difficulty with the categorization and how it's used. And maybe we'll have an expanded conversation on it later. I'm just going to get back to the video.
Also, when I speak of inflicting consequences on bad people, I don't exclusively mean defensive force. One of the more underrated tools in our arsenal is the social boycott. In anarchy, as a consequence of free association, our society will be composed of a web of relations that can make such collective action a viable means of resistance. Even an organized minority that refuses to engage with anyone who supports a bad person has the capacity to exercise immense social pressure and thus create meaningful consequences. Bad people and their predatory strategies will remain on the fringes of anarchy for as long as we stand up for ourselves and those around us and leave no hierarchies left for them to climb. No more outsourcing our safety. It is all of our responsibility to ensure that white supremacists, former cops, wannabe cultists, and fundamentalist gangs are met with resistance at every step. We don't try to debate them out of their position. We don't give them an inch so they can take a mile. We don't beg them to see our humanity. We make their attempts to harm others as costly as possible, by every means available to us. Those who seek to reform for the better will be met with those willing to do that work. But for the fringe few who continue to hurt, torture, and kill others for the love of the game, we meet them with force when necessary. That includes the rapists and abusers. I'm not going to be self-censoring rape with grape or anything like that, so I'm pretty sure YouTube won't like this. Consider supporting the Patreon if you also despise the censorship and trivialization of important topics by YouTube's policies. I'm zeroing in on this particular category of bad people to make something very clear. To quote anarchist Lee Secuta's intimate authoritarianism, abuse is not individual pathology. Abuse is not an unfortunate mistake. Abuse is the form that systematic oppression takes on an interpersonal level. It is an agent of patriarchy, ableism, capitalism, and white supremacy. It is intimate authoritarianism, and must be resisted just as strongly as we endeavor to challenge authoritarianism on a structural level. Rape culture is a war against entire populations of people. Rapists and abusers relish domination. They get off on suppressing the agency of others. They are just as much ideological enemies as feds, fascists, and fundamentalists, and they must be resisted just as directly and consistently as we resist any other agents of oppression. This is why trying to rehabilitate them through an accountability process should not be the default response. Our time, energy, and resources are limited. As Gillis points out, you're not going to get the rapist or abuser to change their whole predatory motivation by making them read some feminist theory. They might just learn some new performative language to use while continuing to prey on their victims. Or years of effort get wasted on reforming a predator who may have had a terrible childhood but never had any interest in change in the first place. Worse yet is when accountability processes are hijacked by the folks involved. Gillis describes cases where the perpetrator's friends use the process to protect the perpetrator and marginalize the survivor, or the mediator sought personal prestige, Or everybody just wanted to restore the community by suppressing conflict, which eventually led to the
Need. This is a form of need, right? This is putting need before moral considerations.
survivor being expelled instead of the perpetrator. In her article, Activist Scenes Are No Safe Space for Women, activist Tamara K. Nopper describes cases where survivors of abuse in activist spaces were dismissed and shunned while their abuser continued to be supported. I agree with Lisa.
And I was starting to get a little bit worried that I was going to have to cook up a whole bunch of stuff to tie everything back around to the title of the essay, but clearly not. Andrewism is doing that. We're bringing everything full circle back to disability and disposability. Right? If you are disposable in your leftist movement, are you in a leftist movement? Anyway.
Prosecutor's position that, as with anti-fascist work, our priority must be on destroying the abuser's capacity to carry out harm, not their rehabilitation. Let me be clear, I know not all situations are cut and dry. Though extremely rare, false accusations do happen and should be taken seriously without being weaponized against survivors. Also, I know that in sexual situations, miscommunications happen. Otherwise, decent people can unintentionally cause harm. Not every instance of consent violation is necessarily driven by a dominative value system. Of course, such instances should still be addressed according to the wishes of the person affected, and such instances can be avoided with more education on enthusiastic consent. But these instances are a far cry from the ideologically driven actors who knowingly and repeatedly violate people because they're motivated by power and control. Don't get me wrong. Bad people can change. I'm not taking rehabilitation off the table. But the people who genuinely change their values and behavior do so because they genuinely want to, not because they've been peer pressured into an accountability process. David Graeber once said, bullying is not just a relation between bully and victim. It's really a three-way relation between bully, victim, and everyone who refuses to do anything about the aggression. This dynamic also applies to other forms of abuse. In Anarchy in Its Pursuit, it is all of our responsibility to actively resist bullies, abusers, rapists, and authoritarians. In Anarchy in Its Pursuit, we keep us safe. We're not always going to get along with each other, but we have to reach a point where when push comes to shove, we have each other's backs. Many of us are unprepared for the level of responsibility and initiative that anarchy requires of us. The status quo breeds passivity and apathy. We're taught to obey, wait, and depend on others to act first, even when we are more intimately aware of the situation than any distant authority could ever be. But that's why social revolution must develop in us the power and drive to act on our own initiative, to stand up to all forms of authority and prejudice, and to make the world we seek so compelling that all but the most stubborn would be drawn to join our efforts.
And I'd like to, well, first say absolutely curse chaos. Jane is absolutely right. Ostracization is absolutely justified in dealing with oppressors. It's, in my opinion, probably the best way. Bully the bullies, and get the rest of culture and society to side with you, right? To recognize the bullying, the oppressive behavior, and then to treat it as thus. Ostracization is, I talked about this before, that before societies had police, before there were mechanisms of state recourse for dealing with problem citizens, we had a solution. We would just make people into pariahs. If you can't work with us in the way that we all want to work together, okay, bye, Felicia, right? We'll just stop cooperating with you. We'll just stop doing business with you and stop selling groceries to you and selling clothes to you and selling shoes to you and doing work with you or for you or allowing you to work with us. Bye, Felicia. That's how, for most of human history, cancel culture. That when people get bent out of shape about cancel culture, that is wild. It is the oldest form of social justice. Cancel culture has been around as long as culture and society has been a thing. It's not new. It's not woke. That's how societies deal with people. Yeah, we had a form of social boycott. Absolutely. Cancel culture plus personal responsibility. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. 100. All right. So, and the reason why I stopped the video actually is because this starts to clue in the difficulty. Right? We need a different understanding of the world and our relationship to it. We need to not only feel empowered within our own communities to police and protect those communities, but we need to see the world in such a way that we automatically, naturally, habitually assume so. Right? It will require a transformation in how we understand our relationship to the material world. Prefiguratively, what we're talking about is prefiguration, which is, I'm guessing, I haven't seen this video, but I'm pretty sure that's where this is going to go.
The status quo persists thanks in large part to the role of systemic inertia. It's entrenched and difficult to see beyond, so it persists. That's why we need to generate our own inertia. We need to create spaces and cultures where autonomy, solidarity, responsibility, and mutuality are second nature, where disagreement is honestly reflected through our approach to organizing so that it is easier to go against the grain. We need to build a critical mass of free people who make it so that free association and resistance to authority become the new normal.
Now, I really like this, Kaimatara. It's how we stopped tyrants in our society pre-colonialization. If a rangatira would brag too much about a big catch he got from hunting, he would be teased and mocked to not let him get a sense of superiority over the hapu. If he still kept acting above everyone, he would be stripped of mana and no longer allowed to be rangatira anymore. Rangatira. I'm glad that you brought that up. That there's a mechanism for humbling the leader. Right. This is speaking of. I was talking about Chikashan values earlier, and that they have something similar for their chiefs. So the position of chief is first off, it's a responsibility. It's not, you don't sit on a throne over the top of the people. You now take on a job, and that job has lots of duties and responsibilities. You are a servant to the people. But you are an executor and you are a tiebreaker in a lot of ways. So it's a very important position that has lots of prestige and is kind of at the top of a hierarchy. I say kind of at the top because it's actually not. There would also be a woman's council who is in charge of appointing the chief and is always able to hold the chief into account. And so there are lots of social protocols that are built into their how they do their proceedings that are intended for the council, who isn't in charge of anything except for this person's position, right? The council is ever present and is a regular humbling presence for the chief. The chief is only chief because the elders of the women's council, and that there's a white council and a red council, and there's different councils that do different things, but like there's a council specifically for this role of deciding on who gets to be chief and if that chief gets to stay in their position, because it's not a lifetime appointment. It's a job that you do well, and if you don't, then we'll find somebody else who's going to do that job better. Right, so I really liked how there's built-in accountabilities for any position of power, right? And that would make sense that you would have positions of power, but that those positions of power would be checked by something else, right? That it seems silly that you would have, for example, a police force with no checks and no accountability and no political body that has a responsibility to rein in the force of this governing body who is in control of your rights. Seems like that's kind of a risky idea. Police. And the sand and insulting the meat. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you, Nisa. I meant to ask you to expound upon the insulting the meat thing, and I got distracted. Like the sand and the insulting the meat. So if you could expound upon that, Nisa. Now that we've come back around to it, I completely forgot about that. Instant recallability is paramount to opposing oppressive forces. And that's the benefit that you get with the fluid emergent leadership. That leadership is decided by the situation, actually, usually. And the people in the situation make the decision, and those people are always able to change their mind. That's one of the neat things about anarchism, is that you can be in a system and then you can decide to enter in associations, free associations, and then change your mind about the association or about the organization or about any of the parts of it. You are allowed, in anarchism, you are always allowed at any and every point to say, I changed my mind. That's always okay. I guess that ties in with my critique of allyship 2. I think that the issue of this, the first, they came for a poem, the first they came for a poem flipped on its head. First they came for the Maori, I spoke out because I am an ally. Then they came for the Pacifica, there we go, Pacifica, and I spoke out because I'm an ally. Then they came for the LGBTQ community, and I spoke out because I'm an ally. As you can see, that still centers the member of the dominant group over the very people they are meant to be helping. This still centers the member of the dominant group over, yes, it still centers the dominant, which becomes invisible. Dominant groups become invisible and don't get recognized as groups. They get assumed as normal rather than being a group. They are a group, but absolutely through centering themselves and their allyship, they enable a non-being of the marginalized group. They enable the non-being of the marginalized group, right? I was talking about this on last stream, that when I, as an ethics professor, first started teaching about racism in the classroom, that I had a tendency to center myself and to center my whiteness rather than to make racism and the abuses suffered by people who have suffered racism, right? That should be the center of the conversation. not my allyship. Not that I get a cookie because I'm doing such a good job by teaching about racism in the classroom. That's not what this is about. That's not supposed to be what this is about, right? If I'm concerned about solving the problem, I put the problem first. I center the problem, and I put myself around the problem. I don't center myself, right? Yeah. It is as Kiyomatara is describing, and for the san, it usually takes the it usually takes the form of a person. Chat keeps jumping. And for the san, it usually takes the form of if a person is inherently good at something like hunting, for example, they are actually encouraged not to do that thing unless the community has a need for greater skill. Huh. That's really quite interesting. Right, it's a kind of self-humbling that one would participate in themselves, that they would even, I bet sometimes people would think to themselves, I'm getting awfully good at this, I need to take a break and work on some other things. Yeah, it helps to maintain a balance in the ecosystem. Okay, yeah, that really makes sense. Thank you for the explanation on that. Okay, that really tracks. I like that a lot. Center the oppressed, not the oppressors. Always. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really good at hunting, and everybody in my community wants me to go hunt all the time and gasses me up. I may overhunt the area and do greater harm to the ecosystem and community. I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it. Wow. Okay. Huh. Right. Well, and that's it is a way to help encourage the overall idea of balance. In general, balance in one's own life, balance with one's community, and in all those relationships. Yeah, that makes sense.
All this talk about resisting bad people might give you the impression that anarchy is just an endless struggle against endless threats. But before we spiral into despair, it's worth remembering that most people aren't bad people. In fact, one of the biggest lies propping up the status quo is this idea of our inherent wickedness. So let's take a step back and ask what most people are really like. I recently read Humankind: A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. It's a great antidote to the steady stream of media that seeks to confirm our negativity bias. The mainstream narrative about human nature is so intensely misanthropic that there are people who genuinely believe that the Purge movies can be treated like an anthropological study, or that Lord of the Flies is an accurate reflection of how children would behave in times of crisis, even though a real-life version played out very differently. Both The Purge and Lord of the Flies are excellent contemporary examples of what Bregman calls veneer theory, the popular Hobbesian idea that civilization is a thin mask covering our true, savage instincts. In case you haven't heard of him, Thomas Hobbes was a philosopher from the 17th century who painted a very grim picture of life before the rise of states. He called it solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. The reality of our stateless history is far more interesting. It isn't the nightmare of Hobbes or the romantic picture of Rousseau. We still have a lot to learn, but from what we have learned so far, the popular caricature of the brutal, knuckle-dragging caveman is just an insulting smear on our ancestors. As I've explored on this channel before, human nature and our prehistoric past are far more varied and interesting than either simple narrative can appreciate. There's one apparent constant though: cooperation. For better and for worse. Even without looking to the past, we can...
I want to go ahead and read this before the video goes on further. Nisa says, also when they eat, there is also an inherent sense of sharing. A game is played with children where they are given a thing and then they have to go find someone else to share it with, and so forth. Right, so sharing becomes a regular thing that's built into it. Also when they eat, they take a bite and pass it to the person sitting next to them. who takes a bite and passes it, who takes a bite and passes it, etc. Right? So sharing becomes a part of all of the interactions. And this is what Nice is on about is kind of right. We should be aware. We should be intimately aware of all our moral relationships, responsibilities, and interactions with other humans. But we're not in our culture and society. We are conditioned to look beyond, to look past, to overlook these relationships, despite the fact that they are the most important things, right? In this kind of cultural explanation, in this kind of cultural cohesion, conception, this kind of cultural conception, we there's a constant reminder in all of our aspects in everything that we do that our efforts are shared, that our spoils and our ills are all shared, right? That we have to recognize that we are in this together. Rousseau is the dehumanizing romanticization. I think so too. Now I like Rousseau a lot, for a lot of things. So it's funny. I talked a few streams ago about that. I was like, I'm not gonna forget to drag John Locke. Right, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna talk some trash about John Locke. I won't forget, and then I forgot. When it comes to these philosophers, Hobbes, Rousseau, and Locke, these are the founding fathers of rights. So I know them. I know them quite extensively, and I absolutely agree, Kai Matara, that Rousseau is a dehumanizing romanticization. Yes, but I do like Rousseau in a few aspects for a few reasons. Because in the Western academic tradition, Rousseau has got the most realistic and the most, what's the word I would use? Beneficial, productive, the most, the one that's going to accomplish the most good with people's adaptation of it. When people follow along the lines of Hobbes or John Locke, those people are generally constructing moral frameworks which are themselves monstrous, from my experience. Whereas those who take the Rousseau route usually are more optimistic and are more likely to be driving towards some kind of social cooperation as a solution to how we solve our problems of social organization. Right, Locke and let's say with Hobbes thought that oppression was necessary in the relationship, that the state would need to have a coercive relationship, but that the people would make up that coercive relationship so it would have some kind of balance. Locke didn't care about the balance. Locke was like, well, we just need to have laws and rules. We need to have a state, and that need takes precedence over moral concerns. I'll drag Locke for some other shit in a minute. But Rousseau is like, well, we don't actually need laws to not be terrible humans to each other. We don't need to have a state or courthouses or jailhouses to figure out how socially cooperate together. And so I like Rousseau for that. Rousseau oversimplifies, uses a false history, and also looks at other indigenous cultures in a grossly romanticizing way. So Rousseau has massive problems. Rousseau is not the answer. In the very narrow Western academic tradition that gives us very few options that are worth a shit at all, Rousseau is the best of those options. Yes, Rousseau was a social liberal. Well, I'll have to think about that and give you a more real answer that, Jane. Because Rousseau predates John Stuart Mill. And Mill is where we get liberalism. So what I'm trying to think is if I'll have to I'm gonna put a pin in that. Because it seems like I should be able to give a really good answer to that right off the top of my head, and I can't. That's really okay. The reason why I'm excited about this is because answering that question, Jane, is going to make me completely reevaluate how I think about liberalism. I'll have to come up with a new way of conceptualizing the idea and the thresholds for that idea pre-John Stuart Mill. And I'm really ridiculously excited about that. So thank you. Okay. Also, ties into that cooperation, and this isn't just because you're also romanticizing humans outgrowing badness. No, it's okay. I mean, it's... Yeah, okay. All right, let's finish up. No, let me drag John Locke. Before I finish up the video, let me not forget to drag John Locke. Because it's been a while since I brought this up, so I would like to reassess, to reassert this. John Locke is famously one of the worst at philosophers to ever philosophy. Despite the fact that he is one of the most celebrated and venerated and written about and idolized in a lot of ways, philosophers, all of this despite the fact that it is common knowledge that John Locke wasn't writing philosophy for the sake of writing philosophy. Spoiler alert, he was writing for imperialism. John Locke's second treatise of government was written as a piece for the English monarchy to justify stealing the land that indigenous people were already living on. That's what the second treatise of government is explicitly. To be clear, the crown, the monarch of England, the crown, hired John Locke because they had a problem. They had a problem getting their people okay with spending all of their money going over to other countries to steal all of the stuff from those people in the other countries. People back in England were starting to have problems with the fact that all of their money was being sent overseas to steal stuff from other people so that rich people could have even more money. So, the Crown hired John Locke to write a fluff piece about colonialism. That's what the second treatise of government is. It is a piece where John Locke has an end, a telos, that they are arguing for on purpose. That it's okay for the British Crown to go and steal land from the indigenous people everywhere, anywhere. All of the colonies. All of the colonies are justified. That's what John Locke's second treatise of government is. On purpose, John Locke didn't care about truth, didn't care about justice, didn't care about politics, or coming up with great, groundbreaking, thought-provoking political theory. He was hired to write an essay justifying stealing the land and resources from the indigenous people who were using the land and resources. That's what it is. And all of John Locke's philosophies are kind of like that. He was doing philosophy as a job. In the same way that artists are hired to do artistry, do commission pieces, and then whoever hires them tell them what to paint and how to paint it. That's what John Locke did for a living. So, like, when you've got people like Nietzsche, right, who understand that there are fundamental flaws with general people's understanding of basic philosophical ideas, and this drives Nietzsche absolutely batshit bonkers up the wall. He's got to do something about this because people are wrong. And he wants to help set the record straight. He's trying to do philosophy for philosophy's sake. He cares about the truth. He cares about the words. John Locke cares about getting paid. John Locke, massive piece of shit. That's my TLDR. John Locke, massive piece of shit. Liberal capitalism, folks. Yes. So, yes, philosophy, philosophy, I like that, philosophy, yes, so philosophy, yes, but yes, let me finish up the video, now that I didn't forget to drag John Locke, one of the worst philosophers to ever do philosophy, John Locke. Terrible at it. Famous for no good reasons. Lots of terrible, terrible, terrible reasons. Famous for terrible reasons. Yes! I would absolutely condone that comparison. John Locke was old Jordan Peterson, yes.
You can see how people behave in times of crisis today. As activist Rebecca Solnit found in her book, A Paradise Built in Hell, it's when disaster strikes that our better natures are most often revealed. For the most part, people help each other. They organize. They share. Recent studies on the bystander effect theory found that in reality, across the several major cities they studied, bystanders nearly always intervene to help in emergencies. Imagine the level of social responsibility that we might observe in anarchy, where people have an even greater...
I know I just paused it and played it, and then anyways, but when disasters strike, we see the best of humanity, right? Black flags and windmills, something that we've talked about, that Nisa's brought up before on the stream, right? That when shit hit the fan, for Hurricane Katrina, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, we couldn't get organized efforts from any of the organizations who were literally made to help do those things. It was the people who took it upon themselves to solve their own problems. Anarchistly.
To stake in the social order. Now, I'm not saying that people are perfect angels, but I don't think it should be controversial to say that most of us have a baseline decency, even though we live in a system that distorts that decency. This entire machine is structured in ways that replicate certain ideas and reinforce certain behaviors. It manufactures scarcity, bombards us with propaganda, and incentivizes exploitation. The system doesn't determine all of our behavior. People can still cooperate to distribute free breakfasts and resist injustice. But like I said, our cooperative nature can manifest for better and for worse. People can also cooperate to violently maintain racial hierarchy through lynchings. The system has its ideological diehards, the truly locked-in bad people, but that's not where it gets all of its support. A sense of camaraderie, the material benefits of privilege, the pressure to conform among the in-group, and the psychological and/or physical distancing of certain outgroups are the factors which keep this oppressive system going. Those are also, coincidentally, the factors that foment genocide. It's how an otherwise decent humanity can cooperate to do some horrifyingly atrocious things. It's why as anarchists, wherever we find ourselves, it's our responsibility to interrupt these factors. We can't settle for merely opposing the overt acts of authority. We must challenge even the subtle naturalization of hierarchy at home, at school, at work, and throughout society. And we must build the conditions where our values can flourish. So, can anarchy protect us from bad people? Anarchy doesn't promise a perfect world. It doesn't offer a final solution to every act of harm and cruelty. But it does offer a better starting point. One that refuses to defer to authority, outsource responsibility, appease abusers, or hand bullies a badge and call it justice. Instead, it requires each of us to recognize our role in opposing domination, developing solidarity, and cultivating responsibility, especially when things get tough, messy, and personal. My answers are not going to be satisfying enough for everybody. Perhaps I was too vague or too considerate of the unique context of each situation. Perhaps it's my refusal to sweep our world's complex and messy problems under the oppressive rug of the state. Perhaps I didn't entertain your desire for anarcho-law and order. Perhaps it's because I didn't automatically defer to rehabilitation. Perhaps my lack of pacifism in the face of abusers has made you uncomfortable. Perhaps you consider my assertion of human decency hopelessly naive. That's okay. I'm trying to be real about what we're up against and what it takes to build something different. If the kind of world I want to help build even partially interests you, all I ask is that whoever you are and wherever you are, do whatever you can. Talk to your people, challenge harm, build trust, and never forget, we keep us safe. All power to all the people. Peace. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe.
Alright, I've linked the video in chat. Please, all of you viewers who have been sitting here viewing the video with me, if you could do me a solid and go to this content creator's video and like this video. It's a fantastic video. Let's give them some love and support, because that does help their algorithm. And there's only a few of us, but we can make a difference. A little bit, and that's it was good work. It was a really great video, and it tied in quite perfectly to a lot of the stuff that I'm on about. It in fact covered a few things that I would have definitely overlooked, right? Gives us lots of great information. There's a little bit of lack of satisfaction, right? And it's the kind of lack of satisfaction that if you've been following anarchism for a while, that you are just used to when it comes to dealing with anarchist theory. And that's that they are not going to give you an answer. Can anarchy protect us from bad people? I don't know, is the answer. Right? That depends. That depends on a whole lot of stuff. And it depends on how we organize ourselves and how we choose to think about the things and what we choose to do about it. We'll have to see. And that's with anarchism. Anarchists generally don't want to talk about the process or the frameworks or the rules or the principles, because all of those things will get thrown out the window when we need to do so to eliminate oppression or to eliminate unnecessary, unjust hierarchies, right? We throw those out the window all of the time. And we need to be prepared to always throw things out the window when the situation dictates. Yes, Nisa, absolutely 100%. The lack of satisfaction is where the praxis comes in, 100%. And that's if that in the necessary consequence of this, right? If we take this to the next necessary step, if you find the answers of the video dissatisfying, get out and do something about it. Go do something. Right? If you find the answer dissatisfying, do something about it. That's the answer. Anarchism is very honest about itself. Yes, and it is also very honest about itself. And see, and that's one of the things that it's funny. One of the critiques that people have about anarchism is that it's honest about itself, rather than pretending it has all the answers, rather than giving you the impression that it can give you the frameworks and the understanding of what you need to do to figure things out. Anarchism goes, we're just opening the door to a whole can of worms. Good luck. There's gonna be more worms. Just keep digging. There's gonna be more worms. Rather than it's honest about itself, and it's one of my favorite things about it. Is rather than pretending it can give you the answers, it understands its own limitations and is very upfront about those limitations. Yes, we need to develop frameworks ourselves, right? And this is the prefigurative process. We need to figure out how to be the kind of evaluating beings that can be put in a situation and then make the right kind of determinations. Not right as in right or wrong. Thama is the word that's used in Hinduism. Sama is right in the right way, in the right balance at the right time. It's not right as the antithesis of wrong. It's the correct. It's the way. It's the most bestest in all of the ways. Not necessarily contra to bad, but I don't know. It's kind of a hard appropriate, right? It's the fitting. It's apropos. There we go. It's apropos of it's the right fit for the situation. The right balance, the right contrast, the right something like that. It's let me see if I can. Yeah, I was hoping this would give me the thing. That's not going to give me it. That's okay. Yeah, well, that's not that. Yeah, appropriate is absolutely the right thing. there's a principle that's called means ends unity. As somebody who teaches ethics, and I'm so familiar with means ends, I know what the means ends principle is, forward and backward. I teach that all the time. I don't know what means ends unity is. It's called means ends unity. Apparently an anarchism term. Oh, this is I gotcha. This is something I need to look a lot more into, because this is basically the thing that I'm always going on about when I'm constantly talking about the telos, that we need to be concerned about the telos, because the ends that we're directed at determine how we get there, and as we're going, we need to reevaluate the telos to see that we are still on point, that the telos is a process, not a goal, right? That means ends unity is that point. Probably makes that point a lot more clear than I usually make my point, but good. God, there's something else I'm gonna have to look up. Good. Kaya Matara, why did you put Zoe Baker's name in the chat? I love Zoe Baker. Amazing content creator. Fantastic anarchist. If you want to know about anarchism, that's where to go. But anyways, I'm thinking I'm tired and I need to wrap it up. I really when I started as I was beginning stream, I was almost certain that I was going to get to a point where I was very dissatisfied. Where I was not going to have explained all of the things that I wanted to. I was going to have added no clarification. And here we are. And here we are. I'm about to end stream in a somewhat dissatisfied position where I feel like I have brought up a bunch of things and I have not clarified enough of them. She has a lot of information on means ends unity. Okay, good. That's okay. That's what I will. Good. You know what your audience is, right? Right. Well, and that's yes, and that's to the point. Is the how to explain this? When I say dissatisfied, I don't want anyone to be under the impression that I am at all unhappy with the event. When I say dissatisfied in this way, it means that there is a lot of lingering curiosity that has inspired in me a hunger for more. That's what I mean by dissatisfied. That I'm not sated. I'm not satiated. And that's good. That I know my audience. When I was thinking about beginning stream, I knew that we were going to get derailed. I knew that you all were going to bring up a bunch of stuff that I hadn't thought about. I knew that we were going to go on long tangents where we fully unpacked a whole bunch of stuff. And heck, we did. We did all that. And it was amazing. It was fantastic. You all were just beautiful. But yes, I am hungry. Like really I'm hungry for the knowledge, but I'm actually hungry. I need to go eat something. Because it's been 5 hours since the last time I ate real food. So good. Thank you all for being here, for staying here, and for staying engaged with the chat and with the conversation, and for your insight and your pushbacks. And I wish that I could say enough words that all of you would understand how much I appreciate you showing up and just being here. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's all I'm trying to say. Is that you're all fantastic people, and I'm glad that you're here. Good. Let's find somebody to raid out to. Let's go find a raid target. Ooh. Huh. Hmm. I kind of do. I'm kind of thinking that's who I want to raid out to. I think I'm gonna raid out to okay, so this this content creator is goes by She Snaps. And they're quite hilarious. They've got a really good sense of humor, I mean. But they're really a very wholesome community. The content creator themselves does a myriad of different things, but a lot of times what they focus on is advice for the community, or mental health preparedness, or mental health coping mechanisms, or ways to help you as an individual and a whole community of people that regularly is there to help people in their individual things. So I like She Snaps a lot. It's a place that every time I'm there, I feel uplifted, I feel supported, and I just really appreciate the kind of space that they hold for their community. So I think some of you might really like them. I'm pretty sure she goes by she. I keep saying they. She's called She Snaps. I bet she goes by she. But I bet you all would really appreciate her and her community. So let's go. Good. I like that raid message. Let's go say hi. Let's go say hi to She Snaps. Give them some love and support. Thank you all. Oh, stream's over. It's already. I was babbling and didn't get to thank everyone properly.